Get in the action on the Action Addicts Podcast. No greater faction than the action movie scene. Get in the action on the Action Addicts Podcast. Your satisfaction, action on the silver screen. Get in the action on the Action Addicts Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. My name is COWL, and you're listening to the Action Addicts Podcast. And on today's episode of the show, we have another conversation with episode, and this time it is with the writing guru, COWL Higgins. COWL is best known for writing such legendary works as DC's Nightwing, Batman Beyond, and Marvel's Winter Soldier, but he is probably best known, at least in some circles, for starting Boom Studios' Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic book series that still sort of is ongoing now. I believe the continuity that he actually created has officially ended, but there are still comic books coming from Boom and they're still sort of connected. I stopped reading them, so I'm not entirely sure. But he is the progenitor of Lord Drakkon, a character that absolutely blew up when he debuted originally. And then he is also the writer of the Shattered Grid storyline that absolutely took the internet by storm and arguably gave Power Rangers its most popular and relevant moment in pop culture for a while at that point. Alongside writing Power Rangers, COWL was also given the opportunity to write the official Western version of Ultraman, which meant that he got to cut his teeth on two of the biggest transforming superhero franchises on the planet, and after working on that, he was able to start his own line of comics with Image, which started off with Radiant Black and has continued to include other creators and spawn off into its own shared universe known as the Massive Verse. But what you might not know is that COWL is also a film director, having made several short films and worked on other projects and written many projects, and we're going to talk about some of that. And the fact that COWL may be looking to get back into the world of film whilst also keeping the world of his comic book empire running nice and smoothly. So without further ado, let's get into this episode and let's chat with COWL and let's see what interesting tidbits he has for us across a very varied and interesting career that we've never really had on this show before, so this could be an interesting one, guys. We'll see you in a sec. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. We're live. We're back in the room. And today we're joined by a very special guest who, I should probably warn, you're fine with being on video, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that's okay. It's not something I've really thought about, but your friend, Johnny Yong Bosch, has kind of started that, even though he didn't know he was starting that. But by the time this one comes out, Eric Jacobus will have been out as well. And I think going forward, all of these types of episodes where we have an interview, there'll be a video component. The regular episodes might stay audio, but we'll figure that out as we go, guys. But yes, today we're joined by COWL Higgins. How are you doing, COWL?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. And I relate and empathize to your video plight. I was a sound editor for many years, and I love the audio space. We've started doing more stuff kind of across YouTube and audio for some of the different books and kind of like worlds that we run. And the fact that everything has to be video now does hurt me a little, because it's like just such an extra layer of consideration and production and maintenance and everything. It's just like I'm literally sitting here with lights in my office. Like, I did not think that day was ever going to be a part of my life. But here we are. We make our own fun, Scott. And like I said, very happy to be here. So thanks for putting this together.
No, that's okay. I will happily tell people that it was kind of funny how we started talking. I thought that the podcast account already followed you on social media. It didn't. My personal account does, but obviously the podcast account doesn't. And when your name popped up, I was like, oh, I thought I could swear I was following you. Oh, okay, well, I hit follow, thought nothing more of it, and then I got a message that said, well, that's a coincidence. I just finished watching a Johnny Yong Bosch interview.
Yeah. Yeah, I was literally watching your interview with Johnny, and then I went on Instagram, and it shows when people follow
Yeah.
you, or it shows some of it. I'm not really sure how it works, but we were right there, and so the microphones on these things, they really are effective. I feel like it is the takeaway or something. But yeah, so you were and it was like, oh, that's very random. But that interview was fantastic. Like you did an amazing job, and Johnny, Johnny's a really good friend of mine, and I texted him afterwards, and I was like, dude, this was great, and he was so open and vulnerable about so many things, and also um, I feel like actual knowledge and experience is something that is increasingly harder and harder to find, especially for like emerging creators who want to do the type of thing that, like in the case of Johnny, like pick your lane, whether you are interested in acting or voice acting or martial arts or stunt performing or directing or writing. Like Johnny is very experienced and talented in so many different disciplines. So it was very cool to hear him be as articulate and thorough as he was, because I think there's a ton of really good, useful information when people like Johnny are willing to share it.
Yeah, I agree. Um, as I say, we will be having him back at some point to do a deep dive on all of his direct to video movies. But the fact that he was so open about the industry, about distribution, about the process, and like you said, we could have gone on for hours because
Yeah.
we make a joke at the end of that 4 hour episode. Did we talk about spades enough? And when I went back and edited it, no, I don't think we did, but I did. Yeah, I think there was enough there to get people's attention. But you're right. Like, there's so many different hats that go into film production to making it all come together that I think people don't. It's not that they don't know, but maybe they don't grasp. Like, every step is a mountain in its own right. It's not just a case
Yeah.
of well, if you want to make a movie, you get this guy, you get this guy, you do this,
Right.
and it will be fine. It's like never works like that. It's
Well, I
never
mean, like,
never.
yeah, I mean, and I feel fortunate in some ways that like I was born in 85, so I just turned 40 last year. But that means I grew up through and fell in love with movies through the boom of home video in
Yeah,
addition to theaters. But that period of the early years of DVD, really through Blu-ray, or at least a portion of Blu-ray, I should say, was kind of like the golden age for budgets because the market was so big with consumers buying movies, which meant that more money was being put into the production budgets of the home video release. So the special features, the behind the scenes documentaries, like those were like heroin for me. Like I was addicted to those. And it ended up doing a couple things. One, it started introducing what you're talking about to me, just the realities of what the behind the scenes processes look like, to the extent that like the filmmakers were willing to share, of course. But then that led me down the path of like different websites that covered the production of certain movies, like and especially superhero movies in like the early 2000s. Like I was a really big follower of like superherohype.com and Ain't It Cool News and like Dark Horizons, like and all of those outlets. But all of it kind of like the other thing it did was it created a romanticism around the process of making movies and the industry to some extent. And I think it's a bummer that we've lost a lot of that because I think it also contributes to our kind of like de-emphasis of cinema and the culture. But there are other reasons for that too, including streaming and the idea that everything is just content now.
yeah,
But I also think like, especially like I was saying before, for anyone emerging or coming up, like I have friends that teach down at our old film school at Chapman, and we talk about what the students are into now and like what they're studying and what they are willing to study and what the real prospects are for them as either future want to be filmmakers or even going down the path of doing things and building their own YouTube channel, stuff like that. Like it's very different than when I was coming up. And I think like um, I think the more that people see what actually goes into getting something made, the more they realize how much of a miracle it is that it ever got made at all, much less when it's good. Um, and I think like yeah, so I'm super into that stuff as well, and kind of yeah, hearing all the behind the scenes on some how something actually came to be.
Yeah, same. One of my, in many ways, I think I enjoyed Sylvester Stallone's Inferno, which was the making of documentary he did to
Yeah,
Expendables, more than I did the
yeah,
Expendables, and I liked the Expendables, but seeing basically how he was disintegrating in real time trying to get that movie made just completely changed
yeah,
my perspective on a lot of the scenes that maybe didn't work quite as well as we would have liked. But when you see there's quite a good reason for that, it's like, oh, okay,
yeah.
I take it back. It looks fantastic now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and obviously things like Heart of Darkness, the famous
Yes.
behind the scenes doc on Apocalypse Now is was one of the very early ones to do something like this. Um, what is the Brazil one? Is it Lost in La Mancha? Yeah, Lost in La Mancha, which is about the making of Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which was crazy. Um, and then similar to what you just said, like I love Blade Runner, but I'm not usually I like Blade Runner for certain things. Like you're not really going to Blade Runner for the story. You know what I mean? You're going more for vibes and things of that nature. But the Dark Days, like 6 part doc that they put together for the final cut release back in like 2007, I want to say, was incredible. Like I rewatch that once every few years because it takes you from the Philip K. Dick story and Hampton is it Hampton Fancher? There are a few other writers on it, and just like all the behind the scenes on that and the arguments about credit and things like that. But then how it progressed forward to Ridley Scott, and then that movie's coming out around this. It's coming out in the same era as Neuromancer, and between the two are really kind of defining what we come to think of as cyberpunk. And it's like anyway. So that's another one where it's like. But this is not what your podcast is about. We don't have to talk about movie
I mean,
behind
it is
the
to a
scenes
degree.
docs.
Like I know a lot of my friends. They every now and again another one will discover the RoboDoc, which is a
Yeah.
6 part series on the making of RoboCop. Which I've got that the Arrow video 4K, and that has its own behind the scenes thing on it. And you're just like,
Yeah.
surely they've run out of behind the scenes content, and it's like, nope, they've all got at least one thing that's different, and it's just insane that
Yep.
there's that much of a story that you can do all of these different features rets and they still have new stuff.
Superman is like that for me. I'm actually sitting next to my desk. Camera can't really see it, but it's an original 1977 one sheet, and it's signed by Dick Donner, who I interned for in college, and one of Dick's best friends was Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote the final drafts of Superman and Superman 2 before he and Donner were fired by the Salkinds post, the first one coming out, but having not finished two. And I I was Tom's TA, and he was like he was a mentor to me when I was finishing up at Chapman, and then first came out of film school and into the greater LA of it all. And so this was Tom's poster, and after he passed away, I asked if Dick would sign it. But part of how I got to know Tom was because when he came down to teach at Chapman, I flipped out because I was obsessed with the huge documentary on the making of the first Superman film. And again, they were shooting one and two at the same time. And everything from like the director's commentary that Dick and Tom did together down to like um, just all the behind the scenes of it all. And I was like, it sent me on like very much a kind of a deep dive into like not only I knew Dick's career, but I didn't know Tom's career. And so then when we started teaching at Chapman, and he was standing outside the film school smoking a cigarette, I was like, oh man, love to meet you. And started this conversation and went from there. And yeah, I mean, that became like one of the, like a very, very important relationship and dynamic in my, especially early days of my career. And so that doesn't really happen without behind the scenes documentaries on DVD.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so in that case, then you obviously had been thinking about you wanted to work in the film industry. Is that
Yeah.
something that started when you were very young, I assume?
Yeah. Without without thinking it was possible. Yeah. I mean, I found movies and comic books through the same place, which was superheroes. And so I was like really obsessed with, I mean, I was a huge fan of the 1987 Ninja Turtles cartoon. So I was like 2 or 3 when I started watching it. And then the movie completely blew me away. And I remember being like 5 years old and sitting in the theater with my uncle and very consciously being aware that, hey, whoa, like this is different. This is not the cartoon. But I also really liked this. But I also could recognize that they were different and different choices were being made. And I was in particular like very aware. I was very aware in particular of the differences in Raphael because he was my favorite turtle, and
Yeah,
the way that the movie defines him quite a bit differently than the other brothers is not how the cartoon portrays him. The cartoon, when Rob Paulson voices him, he's the funny one, really. He's like the sarcastic one.
yeah,
Um, his sense of humor was my favorite. But in the movie, obviously, it's there's a really great arc there between Leonardo and Raphael and just the brothers in general that really like struck me. And so between that and then Donner's Superman and Burton's Batman, like I was falling in love with the superheroes of it all. And then these versions of the superheroes in particular opened my eyes to like, well, where are they making these movies? How are they making these? Like, oh, there are people actually sculpting the bat suit and doing all of this. And like, Anton Furst, the brilliant production designer of the first Burton film, it's like that became my gateway to like, oh wow, like I'm super into that. And my dad used to build model railroads. And so there was always like there weren't like miniatures around, but like he would show us, he's a photographer as well, so he would show us photos of all of these different miniatures he used to build, and sometimes there was stuff around or school projects we would do stuff like that, and so all of that was just going into this like blender for me that when I was like 7, I want to say, and X-Men the animated series was blowing up, and I fell in love with that, and that was another big one for me, a gateway. I like realized one day, because I joke a lot of times now that like if we had like even like half or a quarter as much like cool superhero stuff back then as we do now, my childhood and life would have been very different because I would have had friends, I would have had so many different things because of my interests would have been aligned with what everyone else thought was cool. But that wasn't the case back then, and so it meant that like I ran out of stuff that I hadn't seen. It felt like even at like 7 or 8 years old, and like the Betamax tapes we had from like hand me downs of like people recording movies off TV and everything. There's no internet, so you can't like look up like what other
I
superhero
I
movies or
don't
shows
think
were there.
I've ever heard the term Betamax and hand me down in the same sentence before.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My dad actually just got rid of the VCR. It still worked. And I'm like, I went home. They're back in Chicago, and I went home. I was like, "What happened to the VCR?" And he's like, "Oh, I gave it away." I was like, "But it still works, and there's tapes that like we could digitize." And like, why would you do this? Now I have to go find an old Betamax. I haven't even told my girlfriend that I want to go find a Betamax VCR from the 80s. But no, there was one morning in particular where I realized like, wait, hold on a second, like we have a video camera. Like my dad had a high 8 camera, and it's like, we have a video camera. Like, we could just make our own movies. And so my sister and I started making like Ninja Turtles and like Superman costumes. And like, we started shooting little, films for the audio only crowd. I did a very strong emphasis, air quotes there on films, with with our dad as the cameraman, and like he taught me what a cut was, and yeah, I mean, so it all really kind of stemmed out of the same place. And then it wasn't until high school when I realized, oh, wait, no, 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 this is actually what I want to do. And I want to go all in on this and pursue this. And it's, my kind of first love, and that and football. But I don't have the knees for football. So it was like, well, we're gonna do this one instead. And that's, I ended up transferring from the University of Iowa out to Chapman in Orange County, and decided when it was time to put together a thesis film that I was going to take a really, really big swing. And I wanted to go back to the genre that had really gotten me into this stuff in the first place, which was superheroes. And I figure, I don't know that I'll ever get a chance to make a superhero movie. But if I'm going to take the type of swing that I think it takes to create a calling card of the kind of caliber and level that you really need, especially back in 08, 09, to try to get a feature or start a career, it's like, I'm gonna have to live with this the rest of my life if it doesn't, whether it works or doesn't work. So like, I want to make sure it's something that I will wake up every single day and be obsessed with, and I was, and arguably have been ever since, just predominantly in a different medium than I thought I was going to be working in.
Well, that does lead me nicely into that question because, and this is why I turned the camera off a minute ago so I could get up. But
Yeah.
I was first introduced to you in uh, this series.
Yes, yes, that looks familiar.
Yes, year one. This is for those watching at home. It's a big
Mighty
boy
Morphin Power Ranger, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Yeah,
by
yeah.
for Boom Comics by yourself. And I guess my question is, how does one go from film school and wanting to do films and end up instead writing comics?
Well, when I came out of Chapman, the film that I made during my senior year was called The League, and that's the one I was just alluding to. And it's about a superhero labor union of 1960s Chicago. So it's a big superhero noir. There's a lot of Batman the Animated Series kind of influence on it. But during that time, just to rewind slightly, I referenced all of those websites that like I was I was on,
Yeah,
or at least like I was refreshing to see new superhero news, movie news, things like that. There were other things going on at that time too. Like this was pre-YouTube that I'm talking about. This is like '03, '04, '05, '06, like in that kind of space. And there were all these fan films that were being made too. So like Sandy Calora did that big Batman Dead End film that was Batman versus like Alien and Predator, and it like really blew up. And it was probably like a $40,000 short film, right? But we hadn't
yeah.
seen someone really do that like that. I mean, certainly there were Star Wars fan films, there was Droids, there was, you know, um, things like that, but the Sandy stuff took off, and there was like a Grayson like trailer that was really cool. And then Sandy did a World's Finest thing. And anyway, there was all of this kind of like attention and interest around this kind of stuff. But like the fundamental problem always was, you can't do much with that. Like if you're getting millions of downloads of Batman Dead End, great. But like A, you can't monetize that because you don't own the rights to Batman. And B, Warner Brothers is not going to hire you to direct Batman. Like, because that's just not the way it works. That's not going to happen. And so I was kind of looking at that. And as I was deciding to build what became the league, I figured, you know what? Based on the resources I have here at Chapman, and like I had a background in visual effects as well, to the extent that like I'm very, versant in it, but there's a ceiling on what I can do myself. But I was a pretty proficient sound designer at Chapman and editor, and I thought, you know what, like for the same amount of money as something like a Batman Dead End, like I could build my own thing and it can be inspired by and kind of like a love letter to the types of stuff that was a big influence to me that I love in the space. But like the key is to make it to play it straight, like to do it as a wholly original thing, not a pastiche, not a parody, and like build out something that could become its own world. And I
Yeah.
thought with that, I would have a chance of attracting interest. And that is what happened. So, I put the short film out, and one of the people I had hired on it was an illustrator named Eric White, who was a comic book illustrator and also, well, he's a cartoonist because he writes and draws his own stuff. But he had been a character designer on Batman Beyond, and he was actually the artist, the ghost artist hand for Seth on the OC when he was trying to be a comic book artist during that storyline. That's all of Eric's work. Eric's natural style is in the ballpark of like a Bruce Timm, Darwin Cook. Like it's his
Yeah.
own for sure, but like it's got that kind of, and Alex Toth, like it's got that kind of 60s style to it. And he loves that aesthetic. So because my movie was set in the 60s, I actually reached out to Eric and hired him to design the characters. Well, by the time we finished the thing, it was like 28, 29 minutes long, like tons of visual effects, costumes, like fight choreography, doubles, wire work, green screens. We shot on, huge sets that we built. Like it's all shot on super 16 millimeter film, original, bebop jazz score out of Chicago that we did. Like I did full discrete 5.1 mixes on everything. I did all the sound myself. And so Eric was really impressed by it. And he asked me to, well, he emails me back one day, and this is like the movie wasn't even fully finished yet. There was still green screen in it, but this was like June, I want to say like June, July of 2008. So I had just graduated, but we still had what turned out to be another like 5 or so months to finish the movie before it was done. But Eric's like, "Do you have an agent?" And I'm like, "No, dude. Like I just graduated like I'm 23. I graduated last week. Like, no, I don't have an agent." He's like, "Can I show the movie to my agent? I think he'd really like it." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, man. Like you could wait till it's finished, but like if you want to show it now, okay." And he's like, "Have you been to San Diego Comic-Con?" And I'm like, No, I've always wanted to." And I was in Orange County, so it's a very short drive, relatively speaking, down to San Diego. And Eric's like, "Why don't you come down? If you can find a place to stay, like I have an extra badge that you could use and bring copies of the movie, like on DVD. Like I'll introduce you to people." And that's exactly what he did. It was amazing. Like I had the movie burned on DVD. There was again still green screen in it and stuff, but like the cover art was a painting that I had hired a concept artist friend of mine, Owen Colgan, to do. Owen went on to, I mean, he designed like a lot of the biggest champions for Riot games for League of Legends,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Owen was one of like the first like 40 people in that company. But Owen's amazing, and so Owen painted this incredible one sheet, and that became the cover of the DVD and everything. So it looked very, very elegant and sharp. And Eric introduced me to everybody. I mean, editors at DC, like the only person I couldn't bring myself to hand a DVD to was Frank Darabont, which it was just too much. It was also like the first person in the day, and I was like, I can't. I was like, oh man, that's like. He's like, why didn't you give him a copy of the movie? I'm like, I don't know, man, because the dude did the Shawshank Redemption, and I still got green screen that we can't figure out how to pull a key on because it's 16 millimeter film and it's not a pin register. Like, there's a lot going on here. Okay, I'm working through some stuff, and so when the movie was finally done, though, Eric did another cool thing, which was he sent out an email to everyone he knew in film, TV, and comics saying, "Here's this movie that I was a part of, but if you like it, this is the writer director's email and everything." And so a couple things happened kind of right in a row very quickly. I ended up signing at Management 360 and UTA, like I don't want to say overnight, but pretty much. I mean, there were a bunch of different agencies that were kind of courting me, and there were a bunch of different execs at Warner Brothers and elsewhere that were like kind of in my ear and in my corner as well as I was trying to figure out how to navigate this. Um, But the other person that reached out, actually, they were like the first person to reach out. I woke up to an email literally the next morning after we finished the movie at like midnight. I sent it to Eric, and it's like, hey, it's up on the website. Figuring he'd send out if he sent out an email, it'd be in a couple days, a weeks, whatever. He literally sent it out like 6 a.m. his time in New York. So I woke up at like 8 a.m. in LA to an email from Joe Quesada, who was the editor in chief of Marvel at that time, telling me that sometimes he gets sent things and sometimes he actually watches them. And he started the league and watched the whole thing. And I'll never forget his email said like something to the effect of like your love of comics and superheroes, comics and cinema shows up in every frame. And if there's ever anything I can do for you to please, let me know. And I was like, I wrote back and I was like, hey man, like I'm a big fan of your work, which I was. And I just kind of, I don't know why. Well, I know why, but I felt like in that moment, it's like, well, this isn't a door open necessarily. Although he did say, he's like, I've already sent your movie on to Marvel West Coast and like Feige and all of them. But again, this was November of 2008. So like Iron Man 1 had only just come out earlier that year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't Marvel as it is today and everything. And so anyway, I looked at this and I was like, well, this isn't, necessarily like a door swinging open, but it feels like a really interesting window is cracked. And so I wrote back and I said like I also included like this line was like, and if you're ever looking for new writers, you should let me know, and he responded and he's like, well, what kind of stuff do you like? And I told him and he's like, well, because one of the things I included was like, well, there's the League that we just finished and it'd be awesome to do a comic, kind of inspired by it or in this world or whatever. And he's like, well, that would be creator owned and we don't really do that except for, specific cases with like high level and established talent. That's like part of their deal. And so, he said, tell you what I'll do. I'm going to send your movie around to all of my senior editorial staff and let's see if any of them bite. He's like, I find in situations like this, it's often better for you to pitch to the editors rather than pitching directly to me. And at the time, I'm like, but you can say yes. Why is that? What? Why would it be better going the other way? Now, of course, I understand like there is because you need an editor. No one wants to be told who to hire when you're an editor by their boss. So you really want someone to find it and like, want to take the person under their wing and kind of develop them and then see if they can cut it. And if they can, then it becomes like you're working your way up on different titles and things like that. And so that's kind of what happened. I ended up pitching to Marvel for about a year and a half. I pitched something like, I don't know, 20, 25 stories, like kind of like fully broken stuff a lot of the time because the editor it was Tom Brevoort, he's like the top editor at Marvel. He's still there now. And Tom was like, if it's a good story, we'll find a place for it. But often like when I would send stuff, when Tom would get back to me on them, he'd be like, oh, I like this one, can't do this one, can't do this one, and this one. And he's like, and I've shared these with the characters' respective editorial offices. And I'm like, well, they don't know who I am. They're not going to hire me for, a Wolverine one shot that they didn't know they were even needed to do. So after a certain point, I finally got Tom to tell me like what books he was specifically doing and which of those he needed something for. And so that then turned into a one shot that Alex Siegel and I co-wrote. Alec did the League with me. He's one of my best friends. So we wrote the story about Captain America, about Steve Rogers waking up in a prisoner of war camp in Germany, and the Germans don't know that they've accidentally captured Captain America. So now he's got to break out, but he can't leave all the other POWs behind. So it becomes like a Great Escape type, mission and everything. And so that was the first comic I ever wrote. And then while that was going on, I was going up for I did the water bottle tour as like a writer director. And so it was like 6 months, and like I added it up while I was doing it because it was such a whirlwind, and I was like, ooh, this might, I was working in a paint store, but also like going up for like $90 million Warner Brothers movies. So it was this very strange like juxtaposition and contrast. And like Universal was saying, well, we think Kyle's first movie should be like 40 million. And my reps and I are like, yeah, that sound does that sound right? That sounds right. Sure. And basically everyone was waiting for me to bring in a script that I wanted to make. And I was sitting there going, I don't know. I can't do, you know how many pages that is? I can't do that. And so I ended up kind of like burning all that momentum. Like there were certain projects like we came pretty close with the league and making that like as a show at that point. Actually that happened a few times over the years. But but ultimately like I found myself from there like working in uh as a sound editor at the Hollywood Edge and Sound Deluxe and like cutting on, some features kind of like not under the table, like I was credited and everything, but like I was kind of being groomed by one of the seniors there to like go down this sound editorial and maybe eventually like sound supervisor kind of path. But while that was happening, um, DC poached me to start writing for the Bat Office, and nobody says no to Batman. And so I ended up quitting the sound job to write Gates of Gotham and Deathstroke for the New 52, Gates of Gotham to end kind of like right before the New 52. And then I was also doing a book for Marvel called Supreme Power, a miniseries. So suddenly I had three books, having never written more than a one shot before. And then in the 11th hour on a trip to New York, um, they parted ways with the person who was supposed to write Nightwing for the New 52. And they asked me to do it. And it was like 6 days before they announced it. And so suddenly I was writing two miniseries and two ongoing series, having never written more than a one shot and just making the same mistakes twice. It was very funny. Like if you look like, because you're just doing what you know how to do and trying to find your way, and it's like it was very very overwhelming. Not to say anything of like the politics of the time at DC, and with it was a lot. It was a lot to be like a young writer and also figuring out professionally how to do this, much less just be consistent as a writer, was a lot to navigate. But that's basically how then I blink and it's like, oh, it's been like 7 years and I haven't made another movie. Before I shot a big short like 10 years ago called The Shadow Hours that like kind of got me back. And then we did some stuff for Power Rangers and there's more stuff now. But yeah, that's long-winded answer to how did I start writing comics instead of making movies.
That's okay. I was getting flashbacks of talking to Johnny just then.
Yeah, oh yeah. We can both just go.
Yes, I was just imagining what having the two of you in a room together would be like.
No, we're actually we're both. I mean, we I don't think we've never been in a room doing interviews together, but like we're pretty chill. When we hang out, we're pretty chill.
Yeah. What was it like working on Nightwing? Because I know that one of the questions that's going to come your way later on in the when we read out some community stuff is definitely about your time on Nightwing. Because one of the frequent collaborators and guest hosts of this show is a huge fan of your run on Nightwing.
Oh, well, that's very kind of him. It was hard. I mean, he's my all-time favorite character. I have a poster behind me for the Shadow Hours, but for the last 8 years, it's been a big Nightwing poster that's there from the original, like from the 1996 series that Chuck Dixon and Scott McDaniel did, which was like my favorite comic growing up. The only other Nightwing number one besides mine was that one. So that was like, I felt that like as a fan, but also as like a new writer, like I felt a lot of responsibility for it. And at the time at DC, as I was just alluding to, it was really tough. It was a tough era to be making comics in. There was a lot of oversight. There were a lot of like cooks in the kitchen. There were a lot of politics as well. And I was trying to navigate all of that while also figuring out how to do this for a living and like how to just, like I said, be a consistent writer month in, month out on a really big stage. Um, so there's a lot of things about my run that like are kind of a bummer to me, but not in a way that like I don't have any regrets or anything like that. Like when I left the book, um, well, DC was ending the book because of Forever Evil, which no one told me was happening. And then they put me on panels at San Diego Comic Con with bloody Nightwing logos. And they're like, "So, what's going on in his book, Kyle?" And I'm like, "It's not that, but okay." As clearly I'm seeing the writing on the wall to like, "Oh, this is not going to end well for me." And like I said, there were politics behind the scenes on it all as well. And so when the word did come down, like, all right, issue 29 is your last issue, like you're done. They asked me to they asked me to write a statement on it. When I mean they were firing me, but they asked me to write a statement about leaving. And I wrote this statement. I took like half a day on it, and I found something in it that like really crystallized and articulated my feelings about the experience. And I still feel this way to this day, which is that like when you start on a character like that, especially when you're young, there is a natural desire and urge to want to like leave your mark on the character. And a lot of that comes out of insecurity, but also like probably some aspects of ambition, but also just being a fan. You want to write the character and do for the character what the best version in your head, what you would have liked to see as a fan, right? I didn't really get the chance to do that. But at the same time, I got to have a relationship with my all-time favorite character that very few people get to have. And like he made me a better writer. Like Dick Grayson made me a better writer. And that's a very special situation to have been able to, be a part of. And I don't do Power Rangers. I don't do Batman Beyond if I don't do Nightwing. And I don't do Power Rangers if I haven't done both of those two. And I don't do Radiant Black if I don't do Power Rangers. So there is definitely like a linear kind of path out of Nightwing to where I am now. And I learned a lot doing it, like a lot, a lot. And a lot of those lessons, like I said, are ones that I then interpreted and took over to my approach on Power Rangers, including like even running like something like Shattered Grid. There were people, I got to give a lot of, I got to give props to Scott Snyder. Like when we were doing Death of the Family and Batman Eternal, like I was in those rooms with him in those summits and watching as he, and then on Batman Eternal, really James Tynan, like how they approached putting together an event, and in particular how Scott had an ability to like create natural story point jumping on or off points for other titles to like participate in a way that's additive but not necessarily necessary. It was something that I definitely learned from and then applied in our own way on things like Power Rangers, especially like Shattered Grid. So,
Yeah, I mean, as someone that had long dropped off reading comics, I didn't ever expect the Power Rangers comic when that came out because I didn't know anything about it really. But I was reading them issue to issue. I didn't expect that to be what basically reignited my love of comics, and it was. And
oh, cool.
I remember when Shattered Grid happened. Like I went to London MCM and somewhere over there, I'm not going to search for it. I have a shiny uh Shattered Grid special cover that's all holographic, and um
Yeah.
The reason why partly I wanted it because it looks cool. The art's fantastic, but I remember when I saw it and I was like, oh, I want that. And the guy was like, oh my God. And I was like, what? And he said, I have literally just put that back up. He said, I cannot keep these Shattered Grid comics up. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, man. He said, I only brought like whatever number he said, and I'm basically out. And he was like, all the Power Rangers comics just keep selling. And he said, all of this
Yeah.
Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, he said, they've barely been touched. And I was like, wow, I really hope and then I started asking all the other comic stores at the convention, and yeah, exact same story.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't think people remember, or if you weren't there, realize just how popular the book was for a decent chunk of time. Like for a while there, it
Yeah.
really was like on the tip of people's tongue.
Yeah, it was a cool experience because a few of us, like I've told the story a million times, so I won't tell the whole thing. But basically, when Bryce Carlson and I were talking about Power Rangers, um, Bryce is very high up at Boom now. At the time, he was a managing editor, um, and Bryce and I had gone to college together at Chapman, and so we didn't know each other until after college, but obviously we knew a bunch of the same people. So like it was a very kind of an instant kind of connection and friendship. And so Bryce and I, while I was doing Nightwing, we were talking over like Google Chat one day, and I was like, you know what license you guys should go get is like Power Rangers. Like, there's never been anything of the level of what we could do if we were to approach it like a superhero book. Think X-Men or the Teen Titans. It's like, oh my God, like we could really do something where we're not limited by budget or pre-existing footage or any of these things, and he's like, it's so funny you say that because like that's something we're talking about. And then Paper Cuts got the license, and I was like, oh well, I guess that didn't work out, or maybe Boom didn't really, you know, go after it. I had no idea. And then fast forward like 4 years, and there's this announcement that Boom got the license and they're going to do an ongoing comic, and they had the Goni Montez helmet covers that
Yeah.
they published as like a series for the announcement. And I saw that. I was walking on the sidewalk in my old neighborhood, and like it was a Newsarama article that popped up on Twitter, and I looked, I was like they got it. Like, and what I mean by they got it is the covers. Like they got what this book could be and look like. And that was like the covers were like a huge mission statement to me. And so I reached out to Bryce immediately, and I was like, "Hey man, like who do I got to kill to write a backup pitch, for a backup story?" Because I figured they already had a main writer and everything. And he got back to me after San Diego, and he's like, "Well, actually, we're still looking for a main writer, and like your name, has come up." And I was like, "Well, you and I talked about this, like a couple years ago." And he's like, "It's why your name has come up." And I had just come off Nightwing. I was just wrapping up Batman Beyond, and I had this little window before I was going to go shoot my Shadow Hours film. And so I was like, all right, I was like, I've got like 2 weeks, like if I can work up. He asked me if I would work up a take, and I was like, I've got 2 weeks, so yeah, I can do something. At that point, and then throughout the first year of the book, I would say, there was a lot of feeling it out that we were all doing because none of us knew what the market was going to be like for a Power Rangers comic. We didn't know. We had suspicions, but none of us knew really what the crossover was like between Power Rangers fans who buy or would buy comic books and comic book readers who would be interested in Power Rangers and give Power Rangers a chance. And so for me, I felt a responsibility to make the book A, incredibly accessible, but also B, something that would speak to both groups in a way that hopefully balanced each other and made the book something that could be in the spirit of what you remember the show to be, but not something that's a 90s nostalgia book or just designed to tell stories that take place in between episodes or make, you know, random old continuity bits from a 25-year-old show suddenly have closure or make sense. Like there's some of that we did do some of that, and some of it was by request of Saban and other bits. Like continuity to me is always like, if it's additive to a story you're trying to tell, great, but like you shouldn't be telling a story just to like plug a hole in continuity or anything like that. And so to your point, yeah, I mean the first issue 0 sold 70,000 copies and issue 1 sold 130,000 copies. And I think we were the number one book of that month. If not, we were just like right behind Batman probably. But it was like being shot. We were like shot out of a cannon, and Boom had a really aggressive cover strategy. And actually, I found out years later that was actually one of the selling points that Boom had to Saban, which was at the very least, like what Boom could do with covers would mean that there would be more incredible Power Rangers key art than had ever existed before. Because at that point, there really wasn't great Power Ranger art out there.
Yeah.
And so Boom is going like, look, with the roster of creators that we have access to and can hire for covers, and keep in mind, every single thing made for the Boom comics is then owned by Saban and now Hasbro. So it's like in some ways R&D, like Boom is paying Saban slash Hasbro a licensing fee while developing and making the books that then Saban and Hasbro also own. You know what I mean? So like from that standpoint, it's a great deal for Saban and Hasbro, and especially with like kind of like really refreshing the brand from a visual standpoint. Like it turned out to be, you know, incredibly additive. And so yeah, it was big for the first. I mean, I don't know how the books do now. To be honest, I don't keep up as much as I probably could or should. But when I was doing it, like and Ryan Parrott was doing it, like they were, you know, they were definitely top of mind in comic book stores. I would hear that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my experience whenever I got to talk to people that sold this stuff. And it was really nice as well because to me, it was nice to see the setting updated to modern times whilst not completely changing everything about them. But also when you did start doing original stories rather than, like you say, just, well, it's Rita and her latest monster, the target age was much older than the TV show ever was. And I think,
Yeah,
you know, the people that were reading the books, myself included, it was so nice to see a mix of situations that quite often would lean more into the serious and the, wow, this has got some actual real danger and stakes and
right.
the repercussions of that. And obviously, you know, you worked on Nightwing, you worked on Batman Beyond, and you've always liked superhero stuff, so that makes complete sense. But even so, there was still that sort of trepidation that it's only going to be able to go so far because it's Power Rangers, and it felt like that was never
Right.
actually an issue. Like you seem to be able to go as far as you wanted to go.
Yes and no. In the early days, there were definitely limitations and there were definitely guardrails that I would say were put up at different points. And, you know, there were things like with the end of Shattered Grid, like I pitched Shattered Grid a year before we did it. Like like we had to come in with like, here's what we want to do for the next year. This is how it'll work. And like I pitched like the whole event, like the big beats of it and everything. In the meeting where we were going through it all, like at the start of the meeting, there was a lot of trepidation from some of the powers that be at Saban of just like, you can't do this, right? And then by the end of the meeting, we got pretty much everything we wanted to do worked out and like talked through it and approved. But I had to put all the toys back in the toy box at the end of the story. And like that was one of those things where it worried me from the jump because it's like we're going to do all of this stuff, but if we can't continue on past it, it's going to make it feel like none of it mattered, you know?
Yeah.
And to their credit, as we got closer and closer to the event and then got into the event proper, they had that same concern as well, which is like, hey, how are we going to make this feel like it matters at the end? And I was like, well, you told me we had to put it all back in the toy box. Like, so, come on. But we found a few what I thought were elegant solutions. And so there was stuff like that. And then, Ryan Parrott's like my brother. So like once he took over, he did like 100 issues of the book. And I remember him telling me like, "Oh, we're doing this thing called the Eltar War." And I was like, "Bro, they wouldn't even let me reference Eltar. Like I couldn't touch Eltar." And he's like, "Well, different era, you know." It was like, ah, man. So they definitely like once it went over to Hasbro, like approvals changed and everything, and I feel like they yeah, there was more possibility there as far as what you could explore kind of unimpeded.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was you or Ryan, but I think it might have been Ryan. But when the book started referencing like Edenoi and King Lexion, I was like, oh wow, we're just going places now. Like anything goes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I might have referenced them in Shattered Grid, but that would have been Ryan otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, Shattered Grid bringing in all the other teams, I think, made a lot of Ranger fans happy as well because, there's a huge subset of that fandom that gets really, really sad when it's oh look, it's a new reboot, so it's Mighty Morphin again, and I
Yeah.
think the Shattered Grid was a really clever way to basically bring everybody else in without actually having to make them it about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best crossovers, especially in are Rangers World, are the ones that allow for like pairings, like unlikely pairings, and like being able to just spend time with those characters together. And so part of the trick of an event like Shattered Grid, where there are very real page space limitations and everything. Part of the trick for me was like finding as many of those moments as we could and really like highlighting them. Some of them are integral to the plot of the event, but a lot of them, or at least some of them, aren't. So, like, a good example is like there's a moment with Andros and Corone, and based on where Corone was going to be at in her timeline, I knew that if she were to meet the Andros at the point in his timeline that he and the team are gonna be in Shattered Grid at, he would not know that she's been redeemed and saved, and now she's a ranger. So having that moment between them is like an incredibly, hopefully, cathartic moment, and it's very sweet. It's not necessary to the plot, but it's hopefully very additive to the stakes and the dynamic that the story is working within. And just by the very conceit of like we broke time and space, like we kind of broke causality, but also like took the teams from all their different eras and like fractured it and put it all on a flat plane, to justify that they could all meet, even though a lot of those teams are all just one linear timeline, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was really well done, and I know this came a bit later, but it seems like the best way to link it. How did your involvement in Battle for the Grid come about? Because that was kind of almost just a video game adaptation of that story.
Yeah, so what happened there was the the Enway guys, which were the video game company that did Battle for the Grid, they had been making the Legacy Wars game, which was the mobile fighting game for, iOS and Android, etc. And so they had put characters from the comic like Lord Drakkon and others in that game, which is really cool to see. And it was a fun game. Like I played it a bit when it first came out, and then once they put Drakkon in it, I was like, well, I need to play my boy. Come on. Um, so once Shattered Grid was done. I think the last issue came out in August of 2018. Um, I think it was Melissa. It was who was it? No, it was Amanda Cruz who worked at Lionsgate and ran Lionsgate Games. It was Amanda and who I knew through just I'd taken meetings with her over the years, like through my manager and stuff, and then we knew each other socially. And Melissa Flores, who was still on the then Hasbro side running Power Rangers, they reached out to me saying, "Hey, we're actually doing a mobile or we're doing a console fighting game, and we want a story mode, and we want to hire you to do story mode, and like we think there's a version of Shattered Grid that could work if you can crack it." And so I was like, "Well, definitely interested." And so I actually flew up to San Francisco for like a day, 2 days with Melissa and Amanda, and we went into the Enway offices, and it was crazy. Like, I don't get one of the sometimes I talk about like doing comics for a living. Unfortunately, oftentimes the cost or the price of admission is giving up your fandom to some extent, and you don't have to, but it does happen. And like that has happened to me in a large way. Like my relationship with not only Power Rangers, but like my relationship with Batman, with all of the things that I've been fortunate enough to work on is quite a bit different than it was when I was younger and certainly before I was doing this stuff professionally. Um, all that to say, like, I don't get like genuinely excited very often. And going through the Enway offices, I was genuinely like, I was like not shaking, but it was so cool because it was just rows and rows of computer stations and insanely talented artists that are building out all these assets from things that sometimes I wrote for like one panel, you know? So like Trini inside the Black Dragon armor, that's suddenly a playable character, and they're working on the elasticity of the joints of the dragon armor and stuff in Maya, and I'm like, this is wild, right? There's another gentleman who is sculpting and building the Drakkon throne room playable level for the game, right? And he has screenshots from the Shattered Grid, the live action promo that Jason David Frank and I made, like taped all over his desk. So, because he's referencing it to sculpt from. And I was like, he's like, do you want the 3D file of the set? And he's like, there's a 3D file of the set. I was like, yeah, man, like I sent it to him on the spot, you know? So stuff like that was really, really neat. But then we really kind of got down to work, and they brought me into a conference room, and it was all glass walls. So like all of the programmers and like sculptors and everyone and animators could see us in this conference room. And what I didn't realize was that the story mode was the thing that like they thought was going to be a bit easier than it was turning out to be. And so there was a lot of anxiety about like, what are we doing? And we're running out of time. And so I basically sat in the room, and they told me the characters and the skins. That was an important part. There were this many characters that we were going to use in the game, and a bunch of those had been determined based on like popularity on the Legacy Wars, you know, platform or mobile game, I should say. But then we had the ability and budget to add a certain number of skins to those existing characters. So, for example, it's like, okay, I know I have Kimberly, the Pink Ranger, or maybe I don't. I have Ranger Slayer, but we could do a skin of Kimberly. Okay, that gets me Kimberly for the story, right? So it was a lot of that. It was figuring out like, okay, how many Megazords can I have? You know, and it became this puzzle. And so Melissa started writing on the whiteboard, which was like a whole other wall. And basically it was it was the closest thing to like a Beautiful Mind type experience I've ever had, where I had the for I had the fortune of having already written Shattered Grid. So I had solved all of the logic and story problems already, which meant to figure out a version of it that would work with the resources available and the assets that we had in this console fighting game was it was a creative challenge, but it wasn't like trying to figure out the fundamentals of the story. So we were able to break it in one day. Like I broke with Melissa basically the entire game in one day with the dev team there as well. And what I didn't know was like one of the main people running it that was in the room like was texting the artists and the teams outside because they're asking like, did you guys figure out this? Did you solve this? And he's then checking, can we do this? And there was this back and forth that I wasn't even aware of going on. And so I left that meeting, flew back to LA and had like ACL surgery like 3 days, 2 days later, I want to say. And then once I recovered from that, originally the game was not going to have voices at all.
Yes.
And as we got closer to release, we had this meeting at Lionsgate, which was basically like, look, we got to do voices. Like, this is not going to work without voices. So that then started the process and the conversation of like, is there any more budget? Can we find any more budget? And who can we get back? And so at that point, you know, I had relationships with a lot of the actors, and Melissa had relationships with all of them. And so between the two of us and then Amanda on the Lionsgate side, we got as many back as we could get back. And you know, Jason obviously came and did the Green Tommy and Lord Drakkon. And then I directed all the sessions as well. So we did a session in LA and then actually flew to Houston, and it was the day before a Power Morphicon Express show that Jason was putting together, that Johnny was at as well. And he brought in like a smaller number of like Ranger actors, and it was like his own convention. And it was like, it was a really beautiful weekend, honestly. Like it's the most relaxed I've ever seen him. And he seemed genuinely happy and like his guard down, because these were all just people that he loved and loved him, you know? And the day before though, we went for 12 hours to do the entire game, like in one session. We broke for lunch, but that was it. And he was like, you know, he killed it. You know, he stepped up and yeah, it was just, so it was a really cool experience ultimately. And then when they did the animatics and everything, I wrote all those, and then I actually recut a lot of them before going to finals and everything. So yeah.
Was it fun getting to direct some of the Ranger guys that maybe you hadn't not necessarily worked with before, but just, you know, you'd worked with Jason Frank on the short, which we will talk about,
Right.
but not right now. And was it fun like getting to work with Austin and getting to direct some of these other guys? Like Strawberry 17 was obviously Kimberly, but she was also a
Yeah.
Hyperforce Ranger at that time, if I remember
Right.
correctly.
Yeah, I mean that's actually where I met Megan, was doing Hyperforce, because I did an episode of the
Yes.
show, and Jason did 2 episodes of the show. And what the episode that I did in Jason's, I want to say second episode, or maybe it was his first. No, I think it was the second.
No, I think it was the second.
We actually made those stories, those campaigns take place as a part of Shattered Grid. So I designed it so it's like, no, this actually all fits into Shattered Grid if you want to experience this side of things, you know? Yeah, it was a blast, man. It was a blast. Like I had never done proper like voice directing before, but I've directed a lot of ADR sessions for my own movies and for other people's movies. So there was a lot of crossover there. And the way that I like to do ADR is as much as possible, it's like trying to like run the scene, you know, so you get better performances. It's a little more naturalistic, things like that. So that's how I treated it with the actors on this. And I was fortunate in that a number of them I had worked with already actually doing the Shattered Grid Live table read that we did at Morphicon earlier that year. So or I guess the year before, the summer before. So there was already a like, oh, okay, well, this works, and there was a little bit of a baseline for a
Is
lot of
that
it.
the
Yeah.
one where David Fielding that gets to do the big Zordon speech? Because I
Yeah.
remember that went around the internet.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Well, that was actually, yeah. So I brought in, uh, so this whole thing was Matt Groom, Michael Basuto, and I put this all together, and then asked Hasbro if we could do it, and Jason was supposed to do Tommy and Lord Drakkon up until like 30 minutes before, and he just couldn't swing it with his line, and just he was only there for one day and everything, and so Jason Font stepped in and played the part. But for Zordon, because I'm such a sound nerd, I reached out to a buddy of mine who's a very, very talented composer, Christopher Carter, who did Batman Beyond and a lot of the DC animated stuff. And Chris has a lot of technical kind of know-how and old analog gear. So I asked him if he had any gear that could do like pitch down and like big verb live. And he did. And so I borrowed all this Yamaha gear from him, and we brought it in and we tested it out the day before with David, worked like a charm. So on the night of the table read, there was a Forever Red panel before us that was, ending. And the room was already, there were a lot of people in the room, and then it was just getting more and more filled because we were like the headline panel for that night and everything. We had 20 actors coming back to do this live, right? So as the panel ends, I know I've got like 30 seconds to get on stage, swap out an XLR cable into the microphone that's going to be where David is sitting, so we can do the voice live as a surprise, right? So I go to get on stage, and I had hurt my knee playing basketball like twice, like over the previous few weeks, and something wasn't right with it. And I go to hoist myself up on stage. I'm 6'2". I'm not really thinking about it. And my knee pops and I fall in front of 1,000 people. And Dan Southworth and Sean C.W. Johnston catch me, and they're like I'm like almost like blacking out from the pain. And I thought I had just like dislocated my kneecap and popped it back in because that's kind of how it felt from a few weeks earlier. And I was like, well, you can't tear your ACL multiple times, like it's well. So I was like, no, I think it's just my kneecap. I think I'm good. But like we have 20 minutes until this thing is gonna start stiffening up on me in a way that like I won't be able to walk. Just get me up and moving. And so that's what we did. And so I was able to run the I was still able to run the table read, but it was like an out of body experience because I knew like I was narrating the whole thing, but I knew it was like this is really bad. Like right under the table, like this is really bad.
So speaking of that short you did with Jason Frank, there was a short you did with Jason Frank where he got to be live action Lord Drakkon. It got,
Yeah.
clips of the old show playing on these like holographic screens, and it took the internet by storm, I think would be putting it mildly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely spread a lot for sure. There was a conversation when we put it out because we put it out through Jason's YouTube, and then very quickly other sites, including like IGN.
Yeah, IGN
Oh no,
definitely.
you know what? IGN didn't rip it. That's actually what had made the conversation happen. A bunch of other sites started ripping it and re-uploading it as their own video. And so then at that point, IGN reached out to us asking if they could also post it. And so Jason and Francis and I all had a conversation about it. And it was like, well, what do you want to do, Jason? Like, do you want to copyright strike the channels that have re-uploaded it as their own thing because you're monetizing on your channel and we're approved from Saban officially, like that this is the distribution outlet, or do you want it to keep getting re-uploaded because it'll potentially spread it like bigger, like IGN posting it, like that's a 6 million YouTube channel account. And so Jason thought about it and he was like, no, let him post it. He's like, I want it to spread. And so then it just kind of like really exploded outward, just as we were getting ready to kick off Shattered Grid with issue 25, which was why we designed, doing the short when we did.
What was it like shooting the short? Because you were there, right? You were heavily involved in that.
Oh, I directed it.
Yeah,
So I wrote it, I directed it, I produced it with some others, JJ Vasquez and Ramon Palermo. Um, it was, I mean, it was awesome. Like, it was very fast. We shot for one day, but we had a several weeks long set build that we did beforehand. And also, we had all the costumes made by the Anarchy cosplay guys out in, I think they're in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. I don't know what's wrong with my mouth this morning. Um, but that was a whole process because we had to get them signed up with Saban as an official licensee because otherwise we were making an official short film with unlicensed costumes, and that was like
right.
going to be a problem. Um, but yeah, I mean, basically the way it came about was that Jason and I were close back then, and we would talk every day. And he was seeing the way that Lord Drakkon was like really kind of taking off in the comics, but also like at the convention. So people were bringing him the books at conventions to sign, like bringing art, like posters, stuff like that. There were some people starting to cosplay, and he was like, he would text me. He liked to do audio messages, and so he would audio message me all the time, going like, "Hey man, Drakkon is like crazy popular," and he's like, "I just talked about him in a panel, and like we should do a short film. Like we should go do a short film." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, well, that's great to hear the character's working. Like, I'm very what the plans we have for him, I think are gonna be really, really cool. He's gonna get bigger. We should do a short film. We should do a short film. Hey man, what if we do a short film? We got to be the first ones to do it because someone's gonna do it. So we got to be the first ones." And I remember telling him like, "Yeah, man, it's tricky. Like I can't go make a fan film. Like I'm writing the official book for the brand. Like I have a direct relationship not only with Boom but with Saban and the vice president and president of Power Rangers over there. And it's like it puts me in a weird position. But then I had the realization and the thought that like, hold on, with Shattered Grid coming up, and I don't think we'd even announced Shattered Grid yet. I don't think we had. But with it coming up, I knew like, oh, this is going to be a big thing. And Boom was already talking about doing like an animated promo like trailer. And Jason ended up voicing that actually. And
Yes,
that
I
came out
remember.
before our live action one. Yeah. But I remember thinking like, hold on a sec, like there might be a way to do something under the pretense of it being a promo for Shattered Grid, but also this is the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers. So it kind of all just kind of clicked for me like all at once where I just saw it like pushing on, hearing these voices and their clips from throughout the seasons of Power Rangers, which proved to be more challenging than you would think because the masters that exist of those tapes do not have stems and split out audio. So for all of them, only a handful of them do. So it meant really, really delicate dialogue editing to cut out music and stuff like that.
I know what that means, just as a heads up, but I suspect many people watching and listening won't have a clue what that means. Would you mind just explaining?
Sure. So when you make a final version of a show, you have what are called deliverables. Deliverables, depending on what era you're talking about, exist in different formats. So nowadays, you're delivering one of the deliverables is a DCP, a digital cinema print. That's the predominant form of exhibition in theaters. It's basically a file. Um, but you could have deliverables of like a 35 millimeter answer print or things like that. One of the things you always deliver are split out sound files. So you deliver what are called stems, and stems essentially stands for it's for dialogue, DM&E, dialogue, music, and effects. And what you're doing is, in addition to the final version of the film's mix, the 5.1 mix, the the Dolby Atmos encoded version, the whatever, you also are delivering kind of like condensed raw assets. So your dialogue tracks completely split out. So they're ISOs, they're isolated. Your music completely isolated. All of the or the fader adjustments and volume adjustments, all of that's baked in. It's just the music is summed and it's isolated, and the effects totally isolated. And the reason for that is because it gives you flexibility in if you're ever having to put together a new version of it, like a new release, or for example, if you're doing international, like you need the dialogue separated out because you need to go get foreign actors to dub the parts for Turkey or for, name a country. Well, unfortunately, during the sale from Saban to Disney and then Disney selling back to Saban, all of the raw assets for the show basically don't exist anymore up to a certain point. So all that's left are tapes that are like beta cam tapes, which is different from Betamax. Betamax was the consumer version of Betacam. Betacam was in use for many, 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 many more years, up until as recently as probably 10 years ago. So the show was archived. Each episode was archived, especially of the original seasons, on a Betacam tape with 4-track audio. So it's supposed to be on tracks 1 and 2, dialogue on left, I think effects on right, and then music and ambience. I don't remember, because the problem is that's not what the tracks were. So they were not done properly. And so the idea of like, when we got the clips from Saban, it was like, this is the best fidelity that we have, but also the audio is, in most cases, it's actually summed everything. So there's no splits. So that makes doing things like the Shattered Grid short, where we have all of these clips from prior seasons, really tough to integrate, because we have our own music in the scene and our own ambiances and everything. You can't have each clip have the music of its season and show playing in that moment, because it creates utter chaos. It's non-diegetic. It doesn't work with what we're doing. So it became this very, very elaborate, painstaking process of dialogue editing that Matt Taylor, our sound supervisor, really took on himself. And everything from like reversing phase on music in some cases to cancel out bits of it using like noise reduction, but also like very, very delicate down to like the syllable in sometimes even tighter like dialogue editing to get in and out of lines, to get as much music buried as, in the signal to noise ratio as possible. And we pulled it off just enough to, and then we verbed it all out. So that hides a lot of blemishes as well, because it's supposed to be a cavernous space and everything. So anyway, but yeah, making it and actually building everything, like it was a blast, but we did it all from basically getting the go-ahead approval from Saban to posting it was like 4 weeks, I want to say, maybe 3. I mean, it was no, 4 weeks, but like from starting to like build to shooting was like maybe 3 weeks. I mean, it was very, very, very fast. And it was like 11 shots, and I think 10 of them are effect shots. So that was a whole other, part of it that I had to navigate and figure out, and brought in a really good effects house that would do it with us. And then my normal colorist colored it, and Ron Wasserman, who did the original music for the show and the theme song for X-Men the Animated Series, he came back and he scored the short. And then actually, little known fact, so in the moment when Drakkon looks up and Tommy is 18 years old, or younger, I guess, in show continuity, but it's Jason at 18. I really like the visual in my head from the beginning of putting this all together was that shot of like doing it over the shoulder,
Yeah.
seeing Jason at 18 or JDF, yeah, at 18 years old talking, and it fades away and the green comes off of his, his foreground, element, and he turns into side profile and we see him now at, 45 years old. And just like that juxtaposition of then and now and what he was and what he is now, like there's levels to that both in the story but also in real life, and I that was a really attractive image to me. Well, Jason redid those lines because again, we didn't have the originals that we could split out. But the other person who talks in that moment is Kimberly. So Amy Jo redid her lines for that moment for us as well. And if you watch it, they match in quite well. So
Yeah.
it was just a cool little Easter egg. Yeah.
That I didn't know. I remember like one of the times because I watched that trailer loads when it came out because it was so like
Yeah.
beyond what I thought we would ever get. And I actually do remember having the thought that it had been a while since I'd seen that episode, but my
Yeah.
ears were going, the dialogue is it sounds better in this than it does in my memory, and now I know why.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Oh well, there we go. So I guess you probably know this question is coming, even though I'm sure you're tired of answering it. But obviously, that trailer did very, very well, and the comic books were very, very popular.
Yeah.
And I'm reliably informed that there was more than one conversation about trying to bring something to big stroke small screens to do
Right.
with that. And I don't know how much you can actually like talk about it, but what actually happened there? Like how close was it? What was your vision if you
Yeah.
could have had it?
I wouldn't say it was so close that like, oh man, if there had been a contract, we would have been making this, in a few weeks. It wasn't like that far along or anything, but it was close from the standpoint of like we built a story or at least a kind of a treatment for what this live action digital series could be set in the world of the coinless. And it would have kind of featured the rise of Drakkon. And the cool thing about the coinless world that, I built in the comics with Henry Preseccia, who was the artist, and obviously Daniele De Nicolo and Dan Mora and so many awesome people, was a world that was not only an alternate timeline, it was also farther along in its timeline, which meant all of the characters were actually older.
Yeah,
So, for the sake of, hey, this place over here is looking for its Cobra Kai, it was that era. And the idea that, oh my gosh, there might be a Power Rangers thing that is also appropriate for original cast to return, you know, depending on who we actually are able to get and confirm. Hey, this could be really, really cool. And it's a darker thing without, it wasn't going to be like crazy edgy or anything like that, but like it's a little bit more sophisticated and mature. And it's like there was very, very, very initial conversation about like what a budget would look like from a particular platform that was really into it. But then, basically, I actually woke up to the news that Hasbro bought everything, like kind of like overnight, or I mean, they've been in the works for however long, but like it happened fast and it was for like $500 million. And I woke up to the news because Jason texted me a screenshot of the news and he had an audio message, and the audio message was like, well, I guess we're not making our show. I mean, that was literally the sound of it. And I was more optimistic. I was like, well, we'll see. Like, let's see what this means. And also, like, Brian has been kind of like hinting for a little while now that, hey, the fact that we're working on something that would have appeal to legacy fans is actually very important for the strategy of the brand and what they're looking to do going forward. And Hasbro gets really excited about. He kept referencing that. So I think he knew. I mean, he obviously would have known before me because I saw it publicly that this was coming down the pipe. I don't know when he knew, not that it matters, like, but just from the standpoint of he was still running Power Rangers and very much wanted to do this show. And then we went through the process of the transition to Hasbro. There was a time I consulted for a meeting, a really, really fun meeting, but also wild, like with Haim Saban and others for what was going to be a second movie that wasn't going to be a sequel to the 2017 movie because that was done with Lionsgate. And this was going to be done, I think, with Paramount because of the Hasbro Allspark deal. And so it was like, hey, this is a sequel, but not a sequel, but it's a sequel, but we can't say it's a sequel and reference anything from the Lionsgate stuff. So let's bring in the comic writers to talk about some different ideas and what this could look like and everything else. And so during all of that, and even up through like during the Shattered Grid Live, there was part of our enthusiasm to put together Shattered Grid Live was to show certain people at Saban and then it was in that stage transitioning over to Hasbro, like what this looks like and what this could be, you know, if we were to then go do something in the world of the Coinless as this like over the top digital series that we were talking about. And ultimately what just happened was like, they just didn't want to do anything. And they, you know, for whatever reason, I mean, and I mean, I get it. Like you acquire a property, you want to like take a minute and assess like, okay, hold on. What stuff is already, you know, in the works and has to come out? What stuff is being talked about, but like, let's hit pause on everything because let's just like take an assessment of like what this is. And let's talk now that we have it about like, what do we actually want to do? And what do we want to focus on and be forward facing on? And like, what are our priorities, you know? And so the idea of like a digital series bringing back original cast that it was still in this like more nascent stage, it's just like Brian couldn't get traction on it, you know? And which again is understandable, you know? But that's basically what happened on it. And I know it hurt Jason. Like I know he was frustrated because he felt like this thing was really, really cool. It was the right time for everyone to do it. The fandom would have been crazy about it. But it really just came down to like, it unfortunately is a casualty of like a big corporate, you know, sale. And that's kind of as simple as it is. But it's a bummer. I found the doc recently and was looking at it again. I was like, oh man, this would have been really cool. So, you know, I mean, never say never. You never know. Like weird things have happened in life, and maybe one day there's an opportunity to do something. I mean, it'll never ever be the same without Jason. Obviously, like doing anything with the Green Ranger or Drakkon, like it's, you know, but we all have stories like that. I mean, ironically, that project not going forward turned into me starting to build something that I thought, well, what if we did an original thing that's a live action digital series, you know? And I built this thing with Jason in mind, where it would be like in the future, but it was like a post-tech dystopia. So it's like there are these fiefdom cities. So it's like Blade Runner cities in a Mad Max world. And like you hire coyotes to help you get from like place to place, you know? And there was this guy who's the coyote was what I had Jason in mind for. And he's transporting this guy, and then they're attacked, and you realize like what he's transporting is this miniature black hole. And it was called Radiant Black. And it was, you know, very quickly it was like, well, I can't get this made as a digital series. Like I don't know how to like no one's going to put in the kind of money to make this for that type of platform. It's just not viable, you know? And so then Months later, well, then I started planning like, okay, well, what if I just do it as a comic? Because if I do it as a comic first, even a 6 issue thing, like that establishes it. Like then, if it works, we can keep publishing it. If it doesn't, or maybe maybe it opens doors to do in some form in live action or animation. It wasn't gonna be as you know tokusatsu aesthetically influenced as Radiant Black became because it was like 200 years after all that stuff, you know? Um, but then this opportunity opened up. I shouldn't even say opened up. Like the publisher at Image, Eric Stevenson, he and I are really close, and he reached out one day because we were going to do this little 6 issue thing there. And he was like, "Have I ever talked to you about building an original superhero?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, not like a Superman or Batman analog, but like something like new, contemporary. Like think of it as optimistic sci-fi if that helps." And I was like, "Well, I would kill to do that, but I didn't think there'd be a market for it." And he thought there would be, and I very quickly was like, "Well, I have that thing Radiant Black that I wanted to do. I love the name. I love the iconography. It was always designed to be a miniature black hole that's like a transforming, agent. I was like, what if I do that contemporary? And what if I do, you know what I mean? Like take that and let me build something that's, more in the spirit of Invincible and Power Rangers with adult problems and like let me go do that. And here we are basically. But yeah, that's there's ripple effects in every pond, when you throw a stone. And in a weird way, Radiant Black is a ripple effect of us never doing that Coinless series.
That's interesting. Um, so when you started to do Radiant Black, then
Mhm.
uh, was it in your mind at all that this might be the start of essentially your own mini universe, or was it just this is one story and it's probably not going to go anywhere from there?
No, it was very much on my mind. And the second thing Eric said to me when he brought up and pitched me this opportunity was feel free to tell any other creators who I thought might be interested in a fit. So my first call was to Ryan Parrott, and he pitched me what became Rogue Sun like 3 days later. Um, my second call was to Matt Groom, who I was already doing the Ultraman comics with, but Matt was working on a book called Inferno Girl Red. At the time, it was called Dragon Girl Red, and I was going to be the editor on it. And it was very much a like YA tokusatsu series about this young girl. And we were trying to find the right artist for it and everything. Um, but that was already happening as well. And so there was a night when Radiant Black, we had the numbers on issue number one, and they were really, really good. Like Radiant Black number one ended up selling like 80,000 copies. So we had those numbers. And there was this night where it did kind of hit me like, hey, like there's like a brass ring here, and like we should go snatch it because Eric was looking to put an emphasis on doing like more Image superhero universe stuff. And at that point, I didn't know, like I knew Jeff Johns was coming over to Image and was going to have his Ghost Machine imprint and everything and building kind of his own universe. And I basically pitched the guys, I was like, why don't we go, like do this together and build a little corner for ourselves, and that can become a brand as well. And so it was a Saturday night Zoom that it was me, Matt Groom, Michael Basudel, who edits and designs all the books, and Ryan. And we're all former Power Ranger writers as well. I mean, Melissa Flores came into the mix very soon after that. But the four of us were like the first, like we were the kind of the core. And so we were, Michael is really the one who started like kind of setting like the ground rules. Like I was very aware of like the Spawn and Chapel problem, as I like to describe it, which is that in the original origin of Spawn, it's Chapel from Rob Liefeld's Youngblood who kills Al Simmons, right? Well, over the years, Rob sold those characters. So there was a period where I would imagine it was much harder for Todd to like republish that original story. And I think he changed the canonical origin at one point of Spawn, so it wasn't Chapel anymore. But we're just like very aware of like we don't want to build that way. I don't want to build it so that each book relies on anyone else's world or book. Um, Instead, it was like my thing was like everyone take a different city. I mean, Infernal Girl Red, Matt wanted to be in a different, dimension or universe because of his version of what the city looked like in Apex City and everything. And so that was going to be the one outlier. But then, Ryan wanted to do Rogue Sun in New Orleans. I was like, great, I'm doing Radiant Black in Chicago. The Deadlock, he ended up picking San Francisco. No one's in Pittsburgh. And my thing was like, when you pick a different city, it just allows you to build your little world in a way that it's more insular so that when the characters do cross over, they're rock solid in their foundations and then they can really bounce off of each other in a way that feels exciting and it's additive to see a crossover of, rather than these are other characters that got their powers when the Radiants came to Earth. You know what I mean? And tying everything in that way. So it very much was like designed from the get-go conceptually to be something that could be a very modular and accessible and contemporary superhero universe.
Why? This might be an odd question, but what drew you to basically make Radiant Black so Toku inspired? Like you even just said that he wasn't actually originally designed to be. So why or how did he end up becoming that way?
Well, I shouldn't say he wasn't originally designed to be. What I mean is that the concept, the name, and the miniature black hole, those were the central conceits of a like Blade Runner meets Mad Max type story. Now, in the flashbacks, if you treat the Radiant in that instance, in this example, like as like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. So it's like we weren't going to see people use it to transform, at least not initially, but like what you would learned about what happened in the past because of these things, you would see what those characters looked like, and they were going to be Toku inspired and influenced. I just meant like the concept and everything was not originally built around the Toku influence.
Yeah, I'm with you.
With Radiant Black, now the version that we ended up making, like that is, you're 100% right. Like the Tokusatsu aesthetic influence. Well, I'd argue there's more than an aesthetic influence on the storytelling as well that we have for sure. I mean, the Nathan and Marshall of it all is very much kind of like a nod to the secondary rider trope for me. One of those things, like if you know it, like you can see the influence, but like if you don't know it, it's just like a really strong storytelling move 4 issues into your comic. And I'm trying not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't picked the book up yet. But from an aesthetic standpoint, it came from a few different places. The first and most important one is that when I was doing Power Rangers really changed my career in a lot of ways. It also changed me as a writer because I became more comfortable with 2 things that were hard for me as a writer up to that point, which was like optimism and ambiguity. And what I mean by that is like from an emotional standpoint, like I was writing a lot of Batman comics. I fell into the trap that a lot of young writers fall into, which is like, hey, I'm insecure. I want to be taken seriously. Like I want people to think I have something to say. Like my stories have to, comment on the fallacy of man or some like gets into something deep about the human condition. And it's like, there's a place for those. Absolutely. But you know what? Like I also like to laugh and like, I like action. Like I like a lot of different things. I love comedy. And so with Power Rangers, it became a way to like embrace the optimism a bit more. And I found so much more joy and satisfaction from that than I did in trying to be really, profound, if that tracks at all. The second, so while I was doing that and my friendship with Matt and Michael really then introduced me properly to Super Sentai and Kamen Rider and Ultraman, of course, then came up very quickly after that to actually do for work. And I just really fell in love with it. I mean, I'd always enjoyed it, but I only had a passing knowledge of it. I still don't have a super crazy deep knowledge, but like it for me as someone who has been incredibly fortunate to work with pretty much all of my favorite characters with the exception of like the Ninja Turtles. It's rare for me to be a fan of things anymore. And with Sentai and Kamen Rider, I found myself being a fan. And it was a really, really nice feeling. And the same went for Invincible. Like I had read the first, I don't know, two trades of Invincible like 10 years ago. And then during COVID, when I was really starting Radiant Black properly, I was like, I need to finally read this whole series. And I just fell in love with it. And the being able to be a fan of something again was so inspiring to me that I felt like, okay, if I want to, Kirkman likes to say you can't pick your hits, which is very, very true. But I also felt like if I'm going to take this swing, I only know one way to do it, which is all out. And so if I'm going to take this swing, I want to design this book in a way that if it does work, it's something that can grow with me and my co-creator and we can do for a long time without resenting the fact that we're still writing and making this thing 10 or 15 years from now. So that meant like the book is not autobiographical despite being set in my hometown, but and being about a writer, one of the characters being a writer and the other being a movie lover, but there is a lot of me in the book. And that's by design because it allows an accessibility in certain ways that I think can be really additive emotionally and create some vulnerability for the characters writing from a place of experience. And it also can grow and change as I do, right? And so the idea of like navigating the struggles of two disillusioned millennials and doing that through the aesthetic lens of our childhood and the cultural, phenomenon that was Power Rangers felt really fitting for this, elder millennial here to work with. And then real quick, the last factor about it that is worth mentioning is like from a business and a sales standpoint, I'd created a good track record with retailers because of Power Rangers and the success of Shattered Grid. And then I was doing Ultraman. Matt and I were doing Ultraman at Marvel. And so there is a little bit of like, okay, they know me for Power Rangers. I'm doing Ultraman. Now, the third thing, if we do it in the same aesthetic kind of space, it creates momentum with retailers in terms of leading readers. Hey, you like this thing from this creator over here? Well, he does his own version of it here. And honestly, that's in the spirit of Image. Like you think about Rob leaving X-Force and starting Youngblood, Todd leaving Spider-Man and Venom and starting Spawn, Jim leaving X-Men and starting Wildcats, So that was another factor that, was certainly I was aware of anyway.
For those on the video call, you're getting Bodhi cameos in the corner, maybe. But would you stop shaking my webcam, please?
Just his snoot is in frame.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear all of that, and I'm glad that I like the fact that there are more original superheroes out there, but I also like the fact that there's original Toku heroes out there. I think that Rogue Sun, Radiant Black, Inferno Girl, all of this sort of massive verse universe, they help disprove something that I've often said, and I know other people have said it as well, where they say, "Oh, why does everything get rebooted and remade?" And it's wow, no one's
Right.
interested in original projects, and it's like, well, it's funny because yes, they are. Um, you even just said like you sold 60,000 issue one books of Radiant Black.
80.
Sorry,
80,000.
80,000. And it it just boggles my mind when people say, "Oh, well, we have to reboot this and change stuff to make it relevant rather than just make a brand new character." And you think, "Well, you don't." So, but obviously, in the nicest possible way, without going too far off topic, it's a hell of a lot easier to do that because it means you don't have to worry as much about making a good story and a good character because you just have an install audience. And that's the bit that annoys me when they say that because it's like,
Yeah.
I love the fact that there's all these new characters that don't have 80 years worth of baggage that people have to contend with. It's like, oh, look, a new character and he transforms. This is what I loved as a
Yeah.
kid, you know?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I do think, unfortunately, there are a lot of readers that only want the legacy characters, and there is um, a barrier to new in some ways, and also, retailers. There are a lot of stores that only will carry Marvel and DC books, and getting readers to step outside Marvel and DC has historically been challenging at different points in kind of like the lifespan of direct market comics. Um, so it's always an uphill battle. And I will say that like the biggest thing we have found to be our biggest challenge is just general awareness. Like once people find our stuff, they seem to enjoy it, and then they go find more of the stuff that we've done in the universe, and it's a cascading effect. But part of why we do so many things that are outside the box as far as like promotion or even just storytelling, working in different mediums and stuff, is because A, I love doing that stuff, and B, and I feel like it adds to the immersion that's important to us as creators of these stories. But B, it opens us up to different avenues. We did a secret animated short film with Will Friedle voicing Radiant Black, and it's through a QR code in the comic. And there are so many people that watch that short film on YouTube, and they're like, "What is this property?" And then they found the book that way. So it's stuff like that you have to do if you want to compete against the name recognized legacy stuff. And I think creators increasingly have been figuring that out. And it's just like you have to also make a new character in a book where you're presenting everything with such a confidence and clarity of vision that it's like undeniable. And that's hard to achieve. It requires taste, it requires collaboration, but also requires like strong vision. And some creators are better at it than others.
Yes, and I think that animated short, I remember seeing it whenever it came onto YouTube, and it was great. I was really excited to see this character have an animated form, and I was very surprised when I first heard that. I could only think of Terry McGinnis because I absolutely loved Batman Beyond growing up, and I was super
Yeah.
happy when they brought those shows out on Blu-ray. Like the animated series was cool, but I never thought we'd get to see Batman Beyond again in, restored high definition. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
how
I
did you and Will get to work together?
Well, we met because I wrote the Batman Beyond comics for a few years at DC, and I'm a huge fan of the show as well, and all the DC animated universe stuff from that era. And so, um, a publicist friend of ours, Gary Mariano, who used to run publicity for Warner Home Video, he introduced me to Will, and then Will and I had lunch and really hit it off like a decade ago at this point. And I've just stayed in touch over the years. But I told him very early on in making Radiant Black, I was like, dude, I wrote this character for you. Like, because there's even a joke in the comic, in the issue, where they're making the unauthorized like YouTube fan film, and like the real Radiant Black shows up on set. He starts chewing out the director because he reads the script and realizes he loses, and he doesn't like that. So he starts chewing out the director, and he's like, a little respect for the guy literally saving all your lives on a daily basis. You don't even know what's coming. And then he's like, hold up. He's like, is that Will Friedle? And then they're like, it is. And it's Will in the background dressed in the Radiant Black costume waving. And he's like, did you get Batman Beyond to play me? And they're like, we did. He's like, okay, that's actually pretty dope, I think. Eric Matthews with superpowers. And that was how I pitched Will on it, was like, he's Eric Matthews with superpowers, like from Boy Meets World. Like, and I've never seen Will play that version of a superhero. Like Deadpool's probably the closest. Um, but but he was the second I said it, he was like, "Oh, that's great." He's like, "Yeah, I'll do that in a heartbeat." And then he's just been incredibly gracious ever since. And like he joins us for so many things now. Like he recorded some like fake radio ads or like ads that Radiant Black was filming for YouTube in issue 13. We ran those on Twitter and we didn't tell anyone who the voice was. And then when the short film dropped with issue 15, it was like, oh, hold on. Did he also do those? And he did. And since like we just put out a full voice cast audiobook for Radiant Black, and Will is Marshall, and then Ryder Strong, he introduced me to Ryder, and Ryder and I became very good friends. And so Ryder voices Nathan. And so I have these two guys that not only have this 90s association, but they also have been friends for 30 years playing these two disillusioned millennials that would have grown up on Boy Meets World, and they are navigating their own 30-year friendship, you know. And it's just like the verisimilitude and the authenticity, just like it's so great. It's so great. And yeah, they're two of my favorite people, and you know, Will especially.
Yeah, and I'm trying to decide what order of these questions to ask because I'm aware that we have been talking for a while, and we haven't got to some of the things that we said we would. So,
Oh, no
um,
worries, no worries.
uh, were you uh involved in because obviously Will Friedle voices Radiant Black, but I
Mhm.
remember there's a trailer out there for it's because we were just talking about Radiant Black for Rogue Sun that is
Mm.
narrated by Mr. Johnny Young Bosch.
Yeah.
So was that something that you did with him? Because that was well, I was trying to decide whether to stay on Radiant Black or switch to Johnny for a
Yeah.
minute because I was
No, no,
going to
we can switch.
ask
It's fine.
like how you met Johnny and because I know that there's
Yeah.
stuff there I want to talk about, but I also
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that he
yeah.
did a trailer for that, so I thought that seems like a good segue.
Well, Johnny does more than the trailer. I think what you're talking about is like a big recap. Johnny did a big recap
Yes.
video where he narrates, "Hey, I'm Dylan, and I'm Rogue Sun," and Will and Ryder did one for Radiant Black as well. We did those time to what we launched around this time last year, which was rebuild, our rebuild era. And the idea being like creating a natural jumping on point for readers and retailers, and like let's really drive people towards the book again, but also let's make it easy for them to catch up. And so I had the idea of taking this like recap special that we did and like let's write a version of it for Will and Ryder to narrate, and then we'll animate art to it because I've done that since I was like 16 years old in After Effects. And then this could be a really cool thing and a way to get their voices involved. And then that worked really, really well. And so then I was like, let's do the same thing for Rogue Sun. And Johnny and I have been close for years at this point. Actually, we met properly for the first time in the elevator at Power Morphicon coming down from like, I think like some of the actors had rented like the top floor, like penthouse for like a party on the Saturday night. But I had just come finished the panel, and Johnny had been like in the back. He was watching some of it, the live table read. But I had this giant bag of soggy ice because I had blown out my ACL and meniscus and didn't know it yet. And my knee was like the size of already like the grapefruit, and I'm limping. And so Johnny and I are just one on one in the elevator talking, and then like we just stayed in touch. And you know, he and Jason were really close, and so during during that period where I was like wrapping up my time with Power Rangers, like Johnny started reading like a bunch of my comics. And then I had a movie that I was supposed to go do that I was it didn't end up happening, or didn't happen yet anyway, but it was a really exciting project where we had, it looks like you know, Guy Pearce and Aaron Ryder, who made Memento and The Prestige, and like $4.5 million to go. I was going to go direct my first feature. So Johnny read that and he really liked the script, and then he started picking up some of my comics, and then he was sending me some of his stuff, which I really liked. And so we just kind of like just hit it off. And then in 20 the end of 2019, he was doing a project that got complicated. And so a friend of mine and I stepped up and we wrote with Johnny a new script in like 3 days, basically,
Yeah.
to take
Ark
advantage
Exitus.
of all of Ark Exitus. Yeah. To take advantage of all of the locations Johnny already had and the actors he had available. We like, Brian Buccellato, he and I do No One together. Brian and I wrote this with Johnny and everything because we knew he was in it, um, and so from there, like, yeah, I mean, we've just been really close. So I reached out to him for Rogue Sun and I was like, dude, especially with his anime pedigree, it's like, oh, you'd be a great Dylan. And he had already been reading the books and he was like, oh, I'd love to do it. So we actually now do like trailers, vertical shorts for YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We haven't done one in a minute, but usually we've been doing them for the last year for every issue with them narrating it. So it's kind of like 90s, like Fox Kid promos, like, hey, I'm Rogue Sun, and this week I go up against, that kind of thing, but like definitely sassier. And so Johnny voices all those for Rogue Sun. So
That's nice. Um, yeah, I'm gonna stick with Arc Exitus for a minute because that was
sure.
gonna be the next question. Was obviously you watched the interview that I did with Johnny,
Yeah, yeah,
and one of the things that we talked about was the Arc Exitus thing, where he was saying that you were basically telling him to take the script and make it more sci-fi, and his original was more supernatural. So I was just curious, like, A,
yeah,
what was making you think to do that, and B, um, I don't know how much you want to get into this, and if you don't want to,
yeah,
I'll edit out me even asking. But I know that Johnny said that one of the reasons that you were so helpful is because the complicated situation, as you put it, was everything
yeah,
going on with Jason
yeah,
Frank, and he
yeah.
basically said that you'd been through that as well. And before you
Right.
answer that, I want to preface because this is something that a couple people in my comment section didn't quite get the reason why Johnny and I kept that conversation in and why we had that conversation, even though it wasn't something I was planning, is because Jason Frank had bipolar disorder and he had a lot of
Yeah.
issues. He was dealing with anxiety, he was dealing with depression. He wrote poetry about this stuff, and he didn't always make the best decision. He was human and he
Right.
was struggling. And I think that part of the problem with those sorts of conditions is that people don't talk about it. If someone says, "Oh, I'm bipolar." Oh, okay. Well, you just get angry every now and again. No,
Right.
there's a lot more to it than that. So I think
Right.
that's why Johnny wanted to talk about it partly so that people could be made
Yeah.
aware that, you know, people, it, it's not always easy to be friends with these people, but you still want to be friends with them. You still want to have a
Right.
relationship.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I saw what Johnny said there. Like, I thought he put everything beautifully. I mean, I'm glad that he was able to talk about some of that stuff and he was as articulate about it. And his recollection of it was so strong. I think like I loved Jason. Like, I didn't know him for that long. Like, we only really hit it off in like 2016, I want to say. And then, the last time I talked to him was like in early 2021. But the thing is, like, Jason was really complicated. And, we know about a lot of the struggles or some of the struggles. We know some of the struggles at least. Now we know more about them. But, Jason could be the most incredibly giving and generous person on a multitude of levels. And he would constantly surprise me with things he remembered that I didn't think he would remember, just from conversations we would have or things he promised he would do or said he would do. But then on the other side, he would get upset about things that it's like you would talk to him and you just kind of had to like let him work through it because what he was upset about wasn't really logical, but there was more going on there. You know what I mean? And the other thing too is like, I saw Frances, his former assistant, in New York this year. We hadn't seen each other in many years, so it was great to see her and reconnect and chat and everything. But she said something at one point that really stuck with me, which was that like we all knew a different Jason. Like the Jason we knew was different than the Jason that someone else knew, or that, a different friend in his life might know. Like, and so like we can only all speak about our own experiences, Um, and so like, yeah, like what had happened basically was, um, Brian Buccellato, who, as I mentioned, is one of my best friends, and we do the No One Project together and everything. Brian was going to go make a movie up in the Pacific Northwest, called The Run. Part of why Brian and I became so close, even when we first met, is that we both love movies and we both love directing and screenwriting, and that's really where our hearts really are. And so, we help each other out on everything pretty much. And Brian was making some short films, and he only knew me because he met me during the New 52. He was writing the Flash comic and I was writing Nightwing, and he didn't really realize like I had this whole other kind of like life in post production and these kind of technical skills that I had to a certain level. And so he was making a film, and I was like, "Well, I'll cut that for you." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, I'll cut it in Avid." He's like, "You know Avid?" I was like, "Well, yeah, man. This is what I do." And then I did all the sound design for him. I brought in Christopher Carter to do the music, and that actually really reignited me. And that's the point in time where I was like, "Yeah, why I haven't done this in so long, and I miss it." And that's why I then went and made Shadow Hours. But long-winded way of saying like we've always been about like I tend to be friends with people who have an ability to manifest things. Like we see something, we see how to do it, or we see what it could be, and like I gravitate towards people who then become obsessed with like, well, then I have to actually do it and finish it. And Brian's like that. And so Brian had gotten like a royalty check, or I think for like a really low budget script sale or book option or something. And so he finally was like, I'm just going to go make a feature. So he designed this little horror film called The Run that was going to shoot up in the Pacific Northwest. And at that point, the guys that produced the Shattered Grid short were doing it with Brian. And so I can't remember if one of them asked JDF about it or if I teed it up to JDF, but either way, Jason read the script and loved it. And he was calling me going like, dude, you got to get me in this movie, get me in this movie, get me in this movie. Brian was going to shoot it all for like 30 grand and like just rough it. Right. And my DP was shooting it, who shot Shattered Grid and everything as well. And so Jason's like, I want to do this. I want to do this movie. Like, help me get it. Help me get it. He's like, I'll match the money. He's like, I'll put in the same amount of money. So that was like a big deal because suddenly the budget's not 30 grand, it's 60 grand. And so then those guys all were communicating on it, and I wasn't actively involved or like managing the situation or the relationship. But Jason, once in a while they would ask me like, hey, could you like put in a good word, or could you like mention to Jason this, or like we haven't heard from him, or like that sort of thing. And so there was a period where I could tell like sometimes Jason would go dark where like normally you're going back and forth, but sometimes like you text him and like the message wouldn't go through. And like he always had Wi-Fi and airplanes and everything. So it was like, oh, that's weird. So is his phone off? And it would be like that for like a day. And it was like, okay. And I kind of learned the patterns after a while. Typically when he would come back from that type of like break, he's either something had happened or he was definitely heightened. And so he came back from that break and quit the movie 2 weeks before filming and pulled his money. And it sent it all into a tailspin. And, the context of how much they were going to film for the days that they said they were going to go initially film is what he said made it a total no-go. They basically wanted to shoot, instead of trying to shoot the whole film in like something insane, like 5 days or something, they were going to do the third act over a long weekend in September. It's either Memorial Day or Labor Day. I never remember. Labor Day, I think. Yeah. They were going to do over Labor Day weekend of 2019. And Jason was like, no, 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 it's got to be the whole movie or nothing. Or this is how it was, kind of explained to me. And Jason said to me, but anyway, it put things in a really, really bad spot. And, Jason was texting me and I could tell he felt bad because he was like, hey, I just posted this Lord Drakkon stuff. Hey, I just did it. And I wasn't really engaging because I was pretty pissed off. And finally he's like, are we cool, bro? And I went to message him back and it didn't go through. And so then I messaged him on Instagram and I was like, hey man, I tried to text you, but it didn't go through. And I was like, yeah, dude, we're cool. I was like, because he wrote back to me, that's what it was. Are we cool, bro? And then they're like, I didn't write back right away. And then he's like, guess not. And then when I tried to text him, it was like, it wouldn't go through. So that's when I messaged him on Instagram. And at one point I said like, maybe even before that, I said, man, this is a tough one, dude. Like, this is like my brother. Like, you just like really hurt him and hurt this whole project. And like, it never finished the movie. I mean, we couldn't, like, we went out there, we shot, like, I flew up there right before my knee surgery, like my second knee surgery. Like, I was on a bad leg just trying to help, because it really kind of crippled it, And so, we still talked, but it wasn't the same, And, I was always careful about like talking about that with Johnny or other friends because it's like, it's a bummer situation. I'm not angry at him, but I don't quite know. It does feel like there's something there, And so but that said, like when I created like literally later that month is when I got the first designs in for Radiant Black from Marcelo, and then we also got like the robot designs in and everything else. And Jason and I were messaging on Instagram because the Lord Drakkon action figure had just like been announced and showed. And so we both were kind of commiserating over like, well, neither of us are going to get any money for this. And they're probably not even going to send us a copy of the figure, or whatever. Like, but we were messaging back and forth. And so I showed him the Radiant Black stuff and he loved it. And he was so complimentary about it and everything. And so then in New York, like a month or so later, I went out, Johnny and Rod Reese, who did COWL with me, the three of us went out for dinner, for pizza. And I mentioned to Johnny in passing that like, and this is true, the other thing with working with Jason was that every project we did together, and a lot of people had this experience, at some point, like towards the 11th hour, Jason would often pull out. And he would get panicked or scared or whatever, or overwhelmed, and he would pull out. And he pulled out of the Shattered Grid short, and I had already spent like $7,000 to start building the sets, and suddenly Jason was pulling out. And so then it becomes a conversation, and like that's where the relationship comes in, and you try to hear them out and work through, what his fears were and or trepidations, or if something isn't making sense to him, like, well, let's do it a different way then, things like that. And Battle for the Grid game, same thing. But I knew that was also just part of his process, The only time I couldn't get him back was for the Shattered Grid Live. But there was also a very real component of like, his line was crazy. And he's like, he's like, I'm already going to be here till 9:00. I can't take an hour to go do this and then come back, and the run, but I wasn't actively, what I mean? Like I wasn't point person on that project. So yeah, I'd mentioned to Johnny that like, yeah, Jason kind of always pulls out of things. Cause at that point, Johnny was telling me a lot about, and Jason had told me before this about the movie they were going to go do after the first Legend of the White Dragon Kickstarter called Click Boom Click. I think it was Click Boom Click then, and then it became Click Boom.
Yeah.
And so Johnny was talking about like, we're going to go make this movie, we're working on it, etc. And so then actually that December, I had some messages from Jason, and like looking back on them, like they were definitely like, he just was just messaging me these audio messages going like, oh man, I really wish we would have had a script for Lord Drakkon. We could have made them make it, and like it would have been amazing. And you have such a great brain, and et cetera, et cetera. But he's slurring his words, and I look back on it now, and it's like, oh, he was drinking again, or he was using, or he doesn't sound right, Um, and so then I go home for Christmas, and I decided to leave my phone in LA because I was going to go back for 10 days. And I decided, like, you know what? I want to try that. Like, that's like, seems exciting to me and novel and like a way to really force yourself to disconnect. And it was amazing. But when I came back, predictably, I had, like 60 missed messages and stuff like that. And one of the messages, this was now January of 2020, one of the messages was from Johnny wishing me either a Merry Christmas or Happy New Year. And so I wrote him back and I said Happy New Year, or, post Merry Christmas, whatever. And he texted me, he's like, hey, can you talk for a sec? And I was like, sure. And so we got on the phone and he was like, so remember how you mentioned that like all the times that you worked with Jason, he would back out in the 11th hour, he'd get scared or whatever and back out anxious. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I'm going through that right now. And he was explaining to me the situation on the Click Boom project. And then I was like, oh man, well, that's like, I'm sorry, dude. Like that's a tough one. Like, let me know if I can help. Cause I think at that point he had backed out and then he agreed and then he came back and he was going to do it. And Johnny's like, I will for sure. So we hang up. And so I texted Jason at that point because I hadn't talked to him since I got those messages in early December. But I also knew suddenly Johnny was calling me about this. I just wanted to check on Jason, So I texted him. I was like, hey, man, how you doing? And I got this message back, who is this? And so I was like, oh, okay. So did he delete my number, or it's a different phone, or he has a new number, or I don't know. Like, because then I started in hindsight realizing like, oh, we were messaging on Instagram at that point more. And he would sometimes say like, oh no, my phone's gone. I got rid of my phone, or no more phone, or whatever. And it's like, I never knew like if he was serious or not. I wasn't quite tracking it, but I think he did get rid of his phone at certain points. And so, but I was reaching out and I got a, who is this? And I said, oh, it's Kyle Higgins. And I didn't get a response. And so then like a day or two later, Johnny calls me and he's like, so Jason's officially out and we film in like 4 days. And I was like, holy shit, man. And at that point we were talking about like, there was even a version where I was like, do you want / need help? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. And I called Brian and I explained the situation, and Brian had a window of availability. And so did I. And so we stepped up and said, let's figure out something for you to shoot with the resources you have available and the actors that you have coming in and are available, and let's go make a movie. I mean, there was a brief conversation about like, maybe I fly out to Houston, maybe I direct, because of how many hats Johnny was wearing. But like at that point, I was quite broke, and I was like, I can't even afford. This is before Radiant Black and everything. I was like, I can't even afford a plane ticket to Houston right now, like last minute. Like I just could not do it. And we were just starting to enter what was then going to become like pencil down orders because of COVID and everything. So there was a lot kind of starting to happen in the world. So anyway, so I remember Johnny mentioning like he had a different idea in the supernatural thing. Personally, I think heaven and hell based stories are really, really, really hard to do because they're very played out. And unless you have like a crazy original new take on that type of material, it's I just find it to be really hard to pull off in a way that like can be new and engaging and exciting and everything. And instead, I just love sci-fi, but I also think from a practical standpoint, the resources he had, I do remember pushing him. I was like, "Ooh, dude, you should do something sci-fi." And I remember like pitching him out while I was Brian and I were walking through the neighborhood, and I was on the phone with Johnny. And I was pitching him out like, we could do the thing with like, think like what's the, oh my God, what's the J.J. Abrams show? Fringe, thank you. So I was pitching him, I was like, think Fringe, where you have like, alternate timeline doppelgangers like coming over, and so then you can have a character who's like a bounty hunter or like a, like, and then we had Narvi. So it's like, okay, Narvi as your agent is really interesting because Narvi can act. And I was like, let's give him, some good stuff. And so, like, I remember I wrote the first draft of the agent scene where they sit down and Narvi's reading the like how to find your inner asshole book, or it was something like that. And but Johnny's totally right. Like, we didn't send him off with a finished document. Like, we had stuff for him on day one. We ended up doing a full draft, but we were all working in the same document. It was like this all hands on deck situation. I think I threw out the title Ark Exitus because I remember when Johnny then used it, I was like, "Oh, there's a better title. Don't use that." It's like, you can find a better title, man. He's like, wasn't it your title?" I was like, "No, you can find a better title." But it was he was married to it. It's not a bad title. It's just like, it's like a first five idea kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like, for what that situation was, like, I'm like crazy proud of Johnny. Like, what he pulled off and how he stepped up and led a team of people doing something that I had no doubt he could do, but he hadn't really done in that way before, is like, that's the shit that gets me excited, Like, that's what we're all trying to do. And he took a bad situation and he made something really awesome out of it. And it's now turned him into, I mean, he already was a filmmaker, but like this, it validated his ability to finish and execute things in a way that, I would yell at him behind the scenes over the last, or as he was finishing it up, because he wouldn't accept help. I was constantly going like, "Let me help you, dude. Like, do you need help? Like, do you need stuff in sound? Do you need like," and he's just like, "No, I got to do it myself. I got to do it myself. I got to do it myself." It was like he was trying to prove something to himself, I think, in some ways. Um, but yeah, man, I'm just, I love that guy, and the fact that something awesome came out of a challenging situation is, I think there's some beauty in that for sure.
No, I agree. That's part of the reason why I was so keen to talk about it with him, and I was gonna mention it with you regardless, is because it's one thing to make a short or a feature when you have 10 days, when you have 19 days, whatever, but like
Right.
getting on a plane essentially and not even having a script and being like, I'm gonna shoot at the end of this week. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone in their right mind would do that. And the fact that, he said, I had people on the ground telling me that this isn't going to work and we should just cancel. And then once we started shooting, everybody got on board.
I
It
love that. I
really,
love that.
it really irks me when like people in my circle at the time couldn't understand why some of us were so excited by it, because there are those of us that can look at a project and know straight away that this is shoestring on a budget level.
Right.
And the fact that it looks as good as it does, and the fact that he did so much of it himself during COVID, um, you know, it's like this. I hoped it would be, and it looks like it will be the start of many, not an outlier. Um, so yeah, it's like we got to get the next Kyle Higgins Johnny Bosch collaboration.
Well, we've got a few things that we're working on. Yeah, yeah, we've got a few things. So there could be something sooner rather than later, even. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the next couple weeks go and next couple months. But
I
no,
was gonna
I
say
love working on
that's a couple weeks.
them.
That might
Well,
happen before this episode comes out.
no, 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 no. You won't hear about it. I just mean, like, there's some stuff we're talking about and working on that, like, could become very real in over the next couple weeks, and then it would start a months long journey. But
Yeah.
it would be very cool. Be very cool. So we'll see. It's looking good though.
And the other actor who I mentioned a fair amount in that
Dan
episode,
Southworth, right?
Dan Southworth, and Johnny said,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, Kyle and Dan have done something together, right? And were you impressed that not only did I know what it was, but I put the poster for it on the screen beyond the veil?
Considering the short film shout out to Keegan O'Brien, although maybe he won't want that after what I'm about to say. Considering the short film is still not out, the fact that you found that is very impressive. Yes. Yes.
I could tell you how I found it because I already knew about it. Because the
Oh,
other person in that short film is Amy Johnston,
yes. Yeah.
and she
So,
is. I've known her since 2013.
okay, so I'll tell you a funny story. So, Amy's a friend as well, but I met Amy because when we were planning the Power Rangers coinless live action project, there is a character, a new character that we were writing for Amy because I'm a fan of her work. And she, there was a director that did a short film that my DP wanted me to meet because they wanted to maybe do something in comics. And so it's like, yeah, I'll take that meeting. Like, I don't know that it's going to lead anywhere, but like, I'm happy to, as a favor, I'll take that meeting. And Amy was the star of it. It was called The Gate. And I loved it. And I loved her
Oh,
performance in it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know who you're
And
talking about now.
yeah. And so when the coinless stuff started to come up, I was like, I think Amy would be perfect for this. So I reached out to Amy and then we had coffee. And it turns out her well now husband was a really big fan of my Nightwing run, which was very cute. We all went to get pizza one night, and he wore a red Nightwing shirt, which was very sweet. Um, but but no, I love them both. And when so Keegan is a very 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 close friend of mine, and his girlfriend, his partner thinks that Nathan is based on him in Radiant Black because he very much looks like Nathan when his hair is short. It's not, but I mean, it's very cute that she thinks that. But part of it is also because like he's like 10 years younger than me, and like I wrote a letter of recommendation to get him into Chapman's film program, and like while he was there as a master's student, like I was always telling him, I was like, look, man, if you want to make a big calling card, get ready to find, you're gonna have to find this much money, you know? And so when it came time for him to do his thesis film, he was insisting that he write it himself. I think I gave him the premise, and then I read every draft for like a year. And at every point I was like, if you want me to write this with you, I will. Just like let me know. You know, he's like, no, no, I have to do it myself. I have to do it myself. And so then like I want to say like 3 to 4 weeks before filming, he was like, can you write this with me? And so we rewrote it. And it's a beautiful little movie with awesome action. And so I basically reached out to Amy and to Dan and asked if they would consider this and if they would do it. And it was a great experience. Like, but then COVID hit. And so suddenly Keegan wasn't able to finish the movie at Chapman because everyone was locked out. And then but he graduated. And so we've been working on it for a few years now. Part of not putting it out yet is because as my little company, as Black Market Narrative continues to like kind of grow here and we really kind of firm up our footing in different arenas, like I think there's a way to put it out tied to something like comics wise, an original story of some form in some format that could make it actually a really, really cool experience to do the two together. And then it makes the short film more than just a short film. It makes it part of something that feels like a world or a more, more significant piece of property, if that makes sense. Because in 2009, when I put out The League, you could still get a feature off a short film. In 2026, you're not. That's not happening, you know? But anyway, so yeah, they're both in it, and I can send you a link to it if you wanna check it out. It's great. It's
Oh,
great.
I would love that. I've
Yeah.
been excited for that for ages. I mean, Amy was hyping it up at one point, and obviously when Dan posted something, which I think he's actually taken down now, but I remember that for a brief moment there was like some behind the scenes footage, and that's when I realized this is the same project. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, see
Yeah.
this is
Dan and I really hit it off. Actually, the night before I blew out my knee, he and I met at the in the hotel lobby bar down in Anaheim, and we just had a bunch of drinks and talked movies and directing and shooting and writing, and we just really hit it off. And then he saved my life on stage, and then after that we just started hanging out, and there was a point when I was going to do Shadow Hours, or actually no, the Coinless stuff. That was it. When we were talking about doing the Coinless series, like I wanted Dan to second unit direct it. And yeah, so at some point we will actually do something again together proper that the world sees. But watching the interview with Johnny did make me think like, shit, I got to call Dan. Like I haven't seen him in a minute because he's not in LA anymore. But the last time I saw him was at Morphicon, but that was a year and a half ago. So hopefully I'll talk to him before this year's Morphicon, because that's like 6 months from now. But otherwise, I'll see him there.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, Dan has always been one of those underappreciated action guys.
Oh
Amy,
yeah.
for a while it felt like she was gonna be at the very least the next star of DTV action, and unfortunately, that didn't quite happen either. So the fact that they
Mm,
were going to work together again, because they technically have worked together before when Amy was still with the £1,000 Action Company, they did the
mm,
Street Fighter and Tekken short film for Capcom, but she wasn't on screen with him. I was like, oh yeah, this will be fantastic. I was very sad when Dan basically announced that he's kind of done with action movies and just wants to pursue acting roles, because I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of like what I said to Johnny. I know that you've done Broken Path, but nobody's seen
right.
Broken Path, so it's like
Right.
if
I
you,
think
you
I
go.
without putting words in Dan's mouth, because I haven't talked to him about this, but we've talked about this before over the years. I think if it were the right thing and the right scale of thing, like I bet he would probably consider it. Um, I mean, people come out of retirement from stuff all the time, so I don't know. Maybe we haven't seen the last of him from
Oh no, I don't think we have
an action
either.
standpoint.
But so yeah, as you've mentioned it a few times, uh,
Mhm.
and now I've lost where it is on my screen. Um, you made a short film to get back
Yeah,
into the world of filmmaking, and I watched it earlier. So thank you for that, and I really enjoyed it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you.
Um, it's on, yeah, it's on that website, so people can watch it.
Yeah, yeah. It's if you go to theshadow hours.com, you can watch it there. It's on our so it's actually the video is actually hosted on YouTube on our Massiverse YouTube, but that's only because the Massiverse YouTube channel was Black Market Narrative, and then we rebranded it a year ago to be specifically Massiverse stuff. So it's weird for the short film to be up there, so it's unlisted, but it's watchable through theshadowhours.com. And we have a new Black Market Narrative YouTube that we haven't launched yet. There are some things coming up that will make more sense to launch with. And then once that's out and established, I'll put the Shadow Hours short on that channel properly.
So what was the goal with the Shadow Hours short? Was it to lead to something, or did you just want to get something finished in the same way that you were saying about Johnny? Like, I have this idea,
Right.
I haven't done anything for a while, let's just go shoot something.
I mean, there's a little bit of that, sure, but it was more intentional than that. What we were talking about at the start of this, when I was describing um, coming out of college with my film, The League, all of those doors were opening to me, but I didn't have the actionable next piece of material that I wanted to go do that I could have potentially capitalized on some of those doors opening with. And so I decided this time, I was like, all right, this time I'm not making the same mistake. I'm going to make a new short. And this is an idea I'd had for quite some time that I loved, but it was a feature that I started writing. And I decided, you know what? While I'm writing this, I want to go make the short, because even though the feature will be different than the short, and it's quite a bit different, the script, Um, I want to finish the short and have the actionable script that I want to go make done and ready to go. And now I'm in a position, and this was 10 years ago, where it's like, I also have the right relationships around town where it's like we can get this in front of people. We'll do a screening at UTA. Like we'll really kind of do this right. And so that was the idea. So the Shadow Hours is about two identical twins who have this condition where only one can be awake at a time. And so they pose as one person and each one's awake for like half of each day. And they leave audio recordings for each other. So they always know like who they met with or interacted with because they work as a private investigator basically. And the short version stars Tom Riley from Da Vinci's Demons and Britt Lauer, who actually just won an Emmy for Severance. And considering the concept, it's tickles my heart that she did Severance and won an Emmy for it because there's split consciousness stuff in both stories, you know. The feature version, the short is designed intentionally commercial. And what I mean by that is like it's aesthetically, it's more in the David Fincher kind of territory aesthetically, as far as like a modern neo-noir goes. My buddy Bear McCreary scored it. And at the time, Bear had just done, amongst many, many other things, Da Vinci's Demons, which Tom Riley starred in and David Goyer show ran. And Tom Riley came to me through Bear. So Bear reached out to him and say, "Hey, my friend has this thing. Like, I think you might like it." And so Tom read the short script and really liked it. And he's like, "I'll take a flyer on this one." And Goyer loved Tom. And at that point, Goyer was doing into like smaller films. Like there was one, I think it's called, is it The Treehouse? Something, I'd have to look it up, but or no, The Forest. That's what it is. He did a film called The Forest. And I think Tom was talking to him about that, or maybe it was another one that didn't work out. But either way, Bear, I think rightfully so, felt like, hey, like as you're making the short, just like maybe something to keep in mind is like, I think there's a path forward here with David doing this as a low budget feature, as your first feature, because Tom is his, like, he loves Tom. He's like his handpicked actor for Da Vinci's Demons, you know? So we were kind of scoring it and shooting it with that aesthetic version in mind. Whereas the script for the feature, and I'm super proud of the short, like I love the short, but the feature is way more of like the A24 version of the concept. And I know that might be a weird comp because there's so many different style and genres with A24 stuff. But like, I guess what I mean by it is like, it's more like it's very much like an early Nolan kind of movie, maybe as shot by like Ryan Johnson or something like that. Like it has more unique character to it, both visually, but also I think in it, like the story that it explores, because it's all set in Chicago, and it plays with perspective quite a bit. So like depending on which brother you're following, you might be learning information for the first time with them, or you might be watching the other one lie, and now you don't know what to believe. And it very much plays in that Memento kind of space, like Memento and The Prestige, and kind of in that. My two favorite movies are, or two of my favorite movies are Memento and Gattaca. And so it's kind of in a weird way like a love letter to both of those in some form, which made it pretty crazy in 2018 when the script was ready. It had been a minute since I did the short, but we didn't put the short out properly until 2018. We actually put the short out publicly at WonderCon the day after the Power Ranger panel, where we let everyone read issue 25 in the audience early, where we kill the Green Ranger, and played the Shattered Grid trailer that we had made, that we had just debuted the day before. So it was like a packed little weekend. So we debuted the Shadow Hours and everything, and the script's ready to go. And it ends up in the hands of an exec over at Film Nation. Now, Film Nation makes a lot of awesome movies. They're a foreign finance, production company, and they've made just a ton of favorite movies of mine. Um, and so the exec there, it was sent as a writing sample for my book Hadrian's Wall, which my manager was trying to set up as like a show, even though I thought Hadrian's Wall it's a movie, it's a murder mystery on a spaceship, like it's a movie, it's not a show. She's like, but what if it was a show? I'm like, but it's not. But then suddenly it's sent over. It's like, hey, here's a show we're thinking about, and here's the screenplay, Kyle's writing sample. So weeks go by, and the exec comes back to my manager and it's like, hey, so I read the script. It's great. I don't see how it's a show. And she's like, no, the book is a show. And I'm like, it's not a show. But the exec is like, but the screenplay, the writing, I don't see how it's a show. My manager's like, well, no, that's just the writing sample. Did you read the book? She's like, oh, got it. Okay, well, in the meantime, I gave the screenplay to my boss, Aaron Ryder, and he read it and he loved it. And he wants to talk to Kyle about making it. And I have this book that I've had for like 20 years that I reread every few years just to, in some ways, try to like re-inspire myself. And it's a book by James Mottram that is about the making of Memento. And thematically relevant, the book is told in reverse order, right? So it goes through the making of the movie in a level of detail and access that like you don't see Nolan giving anymore. Because this was also very, very early in his career, right? Well, one of the pivotal figures in making that movie was a young producer named Aaron Ryder. Now, Aaron also went on to make The Prestige. He got nominated for producing Arrival. Like, he's made some of my favorite shit, right? He also made The Founder. I mean, the villain of the Shadow Hours feature, I was writing for Michael Keaton, like, to try to take a huge swing. You get him for a couple days and he gets you half your budget, right? But you pay him a ton, but you also get half your budget. And it's a kind of a parachute part, but it's like a great part, a great villainous part in Chicago. And so that kicked off this process that was awesome, frustrating. It took so long because of COVID as well, but we got deep into making this movie. I mean, I was location scouting in Chicago at one point for it. And like during COVID, actually the same trip where Marcelo sent me the first design for Radiant Black. He sent me, not the first design, but he sent me what became the design, and we flipped out. We're like, oh my God, we have it, right? And then he's designing Nathan and Marshall and the robot. He's doing all of that. It's the same trip. I was in Nova Scotia, and then I flew down to New Orleans. Well, Aaron was in New Orleans producing the movie Reminiscence that Lisa Joy was shooting. And I think Jonah Nolan was producing on that as well. And so Aaron was down there. So I'm in New Orleans. Aaron's about to fly to Nova Scotia for another movie. So we were doing opposite treks. So we had breakfast one morning. And as we're talking, he, out of nowhere, he goes, do you think Guy is too old for this? And I was like, Guy Pearce? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, no. I was like, I'll rewrite it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, Guy Pearce for this would be incredible. Playing two identical twins. Like, yeah. And so that started this process of like, okay, let's go through Chris Andrews at CAA, who's Guy's agent, even though Aaron has a relationship with Guy. Like, that's the proper protocol of how to do this. And then when Guy ultimately does read the script, he reads it in like one sitting and loves it. And he wants to do it. And then we email a little bit, and then Guy FaceTimes me, because I haven't directed a feature before. So he's got to feel like, can he put his confidence and faith in, me, or at the very least feel like he goes based on how the script is and what his feel to people are. Because you can't predict whether the movie's going to be good or not, right? But if you go from those two things at the very least, like, it's not going to be an awful experience, and everyone's just going to try their best, And so it was awesome. Like, it was like, I mean, it was a really exciting situation, and it had taken me 15 years at that point, or no, maybe either way, a long time, at least a decade, to try to get a feature. And here I was. It's like, with foreign finance, it looked like we had $4.5 million to go make this. But the problem became, coming out of COVID, that the movie really cost $7 million. And I don't know that Guy at that point got a $7 million in foreign finance or pre-sales. And any actor that would get a 7, there were some conversations that they had with agents, and like actors that would get a 7 didn't want to do it because I was a first time feature director. And so like there was this point where it became like, a conversation with Aaron where it's like, Aaron's like, I don't know how to get this movie made right now. And so it was like, okay, that's fine. And, so I put it on the shelf, and I thought like, all right, look, if this was my memento, then I got to go make my following first. And one of the things that's been a hindrance for me over the years is that I've never been that guy that just picks up a camera to just go shoot something. Like the stuff that I shoot tends to be of a certain kind of production level. But the flip side to that is like, then you don't shoot a lot of stuff because that stuff all costs a lot of money to do. And so I really kind of came around after Radiant Black really kind of took off, and everything else that we've been building. We were planning this book called No One, and it has an in-universe true crime podcast that we ultimately did with Rachel Lee Cook and Patton Oswalt and this killer cast. For each issue of the comic, there's a scripted audio series that we put out that the characters in the book make. 2 of the reporters in the book make. So and there's a big ARG that we ran behind the scenes. Well, Ryan Parrott and I were talking one day. This is very, very early on in the No One process and development. And he's like, how can you turn No One into a directing opportunity? And that very quickly sparked this idea that like, oh, well, the whole project is a 3-tiered multimedia story. And the 3rd tier is the found footage documentary that is being made of the events that happened in the comic and the audio series. And the documentary continues the story. So it ends up being in universe with the comic itself, while also recapping it, while also pushing the story forward. And it becomes this one big multi-narrative. And that's the version of the project that we sold to the financiers. And that's also the screenplay that I have to turn my rewrite in 1 week. So we can finally get into like, all right, when are we making this? Where are we making this? Etc. And I'll be directing that. Thank you.
I'll say congrats, but also fingers crossed because it's
right.
Yeah, I'll come back to you with my full congratulations when it happens.
When we're on set and shooting, then even if we get that far, then I'll relax a little from that part of it, not from the stresses of now it's got to be good,
Yes, and then it's gotta pass the final hurdle of actually releasing.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
So there was some other stuff that we were talking about before we sat down. I guess the last thing in terms of the massive verse that I want to ask about is
Mhm.
when you said about the audiobook. I said to you, okay, that makes some sense now because I remember there being rumors, or I at least had heard some rumors that there may have been either an animated or a live action Radiant Black TV show in the
Right.
works. And
Right.
I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about that because it sounded like the answer was a bit more interesting than just yes or no.
Oh, well, I mean, the short answer is no. The longer answer is that there are conversations that happen sometimes. There was a version a few years ago where um, so Mark Guggenheim is a really good friend of mine. And so there was a version where Mark, who, created and showran Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow and, long list of credits in TV. There was a version where Mark and I were going to show run a Radiant Black, show if we were to do one. And so we had some
Live action.
offers, live action, yeah. So we had some offers from a few places, but they weren't the right fit. And so ultimately, we just decided the strike was coming up. And so we decided, you know what, like, let's revisit this after the strike. But the landscape is so different now post the strike that we just haven't, we haven't really revisited it. Mark's got a million other things going on that he's doing now. So that version of it isn't something that, we're actively doing or will come to be or anything. But we had some cool conversations, like for sure. But my thing is like I'm not in a hurry because ultimately it's got to be the right fit. It's got to be with the right partners because you really only get one swing at this. Um, and we just celebrated our 5 year anniversary of the book. Like the longer we're around, the more issues we make, like the bigger our kind of, universe gets and our footprint becomes. And I think that just makes us a more interesting and viable world or universe, even for, you know, a place when the time is right, um, to go do some stuff in another medium in. But at the same time, like I'm also a big believer in like keeping the main thing, and like the books are still the books are the main thing. Like I don't think you can't like the marker of success for creating something original is not whether or not it gets a TV show. I mean, that's a bonus, but also like that's not a business model either. Because it's like it's playing the lottery, It's playing the lottery, and you also don't know how much money you could or could not win. Because you have no idea if the show getting made is even going to be any good. Even if you're involved,
Yeah.
no one really knows. So I think
Can
you
I
have to
can I ask
plan.
you a
Oh yeah,
question that might like you might not want to answer, and this was not a planned question, but it's just popped into my
okay,
head. Um,
sure.
in your experience, in and your like thoughts on the industry, would you say
Yeah.
that there is an attitude from writers that only work on TV shows and movies that when they're like say, oh, we're gonna make a Radiant Black TV show, do you get the impression that some of the writers are like, ah, we can make this so much better now. You've arrived at the big leagues, Kyle. I'm gonna do wonderful things with this very bare bones, amateur hour work that you've given me. This is Hollywood now.
I mean, let me put it this way. Maybe those people are out there, but I have no interest in working with them. And one of the benefits of doing the book at Image means that Marcelo and I own Radiant Black.
Yeah,
So whatever deal that might come up one day, if a deal comes up, like we're going to want to be very involved. I mean, I would love to write the pilot or co-write the pilot. Is that realistic? It depends on where I'm at. Like you make the deal you can afford to make. You make the best deal that you can for where you are and in your career. Um, but like either way, I would be very Marcelo and I'd be very, very involved. And like that would mean having meetings with potential showrunners and stuff before they're hired. And I would hope that we'd be able to suss that out pretty early because that's just that's not gonna fly. Like I love adaptations. I don't want a translation. I long for the days of superhero movies of the late 80s and 90s and early 2000s even where it's like they feel like someone is coming in and making choices. The last one I felt really was like that was the Batman, where it's clearly someone coming in and making adaptation and creative choices on the character in a way that creates a unified vision of the character that I feel like we've lost with the Marvelification of superhero universes where everything has to fit together and look like it can exist in the same world. That said, do I want someone who wants to come in and scrap the heart and soul of what makes Radiant Black work in order to I don't even want to pitch a bad version because I don't want to put that out into the world. No, I don't want that either. So I think that all of it is a conversation ultimately at the end of the day. And I think in this day and age, there's a lot we want to do on our own, and there are a lot of mediums that we're already doing things in on our own that I think we can do even bigger. But as far as like something in the traditional model of like a big streaming show or something like that. Um, I think to do something like that, everyone's aware of the optics of not having the creators involved. And I think that most people, anyway, it seems like get the additive value of that if the creator has the right mindset and temperament for it, you know? And I think that ultimately comes down. It's kind of like going on a bunch of first dates and seeing, like, okay, could this work? Do I feel comfortable with this person working with them, or even them if they're big enough, they're going to probably want to do it on their own. Do I feel comfortable with that? Do I trust that? And I think all of it's just it's a case by case basis. So we'll cross those bridges if they ever come up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, was there any of your other shorts that you wanted to talk about before I move into the questions I have from the community?
No, I think we're good. I think we hit them all predominantly.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I am going to start with the man Andy Gorham, who gave me 3 questions to ask.
3 questions. All right.
Some of these might be really quickly. So I'm going to start with this one, and which is, did you seek out any info from JDF while writing Power Rangers to incorporate into his story?
Um, I don't know that I sought anything out. I mean, there were things that would come up in conversation that sometimes like would give me an idea, just knowing some of the behind the scenes dynamics, like from his point of view in certain instances, gave me, it was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I don't know whether that's true or not. It's interesting. And so then that would find its way sometimes in a way you probably wouldn't be able to pinpoint, ways you couldn't pinpoint, but like it would spark something for me, or like a character's perspective on something maybe. So stuff like that. But other than that, like, we did the Soul of the Dragon comic, and that one, Jason had wanted to do an older Green Ranger story for a long time. And like I saw Johnny talk about that on his interview, and like, yeah, I mean that predated me quite a bit. The fact that Jason wanted to do something with an older Green Ranger. And so at a certain point it turned into a conversation with Boom by way of Saban. Saban brought it to Boom going like, "Hey, what if we do an old Green Ranger story that Jason's involved in, and like it also could be something that if it works becomes a vehicle to do something in live action, right?" And this was before the coinless stuff, that the Shattered Grid short film and the coinless stuff really started. But they overlapped because ultimately when we did the Soul of the Dragon comic, Jason, like I was bouncing ideas off of him over text and email. And like I remember sharing the outline for it with him, and he loved it. And he was like, "This is the story I've been waiting for." And he goes, and he pinged on, I had made Kat, Sutherland's character, Kat, his wife in it. And so much of what Soul of the Dragon is coming out of the Dimensions in Danger 25th anniversary special, where you have Tommy and Kat, they hold hands at the end of the episode, which is the only inclination that like they're together. But then when he's walking up to the front doorstep in the opening of the episode, there's like a tricycle in the front yard, and he's yelling out JJ. And so we made the choice to center it around his son JJ and put Tommy and Kat together as Tommy's retiring and has to come back, for one last. It's like a Western, like the old gunslinger straps on the guns for one last time, right?
Can I just stop you
And
there
Jason,
2 seconds?
yeah.
Did you know that in Power Rangers Zeo they had an episode set in the future that showed Tommy
Yes.
and Kat married? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because the way you
Yeah,
just
yeah,
said all
yeah.
that sounded like that was a happy accident.
No. We did it. I mean, look, there was a conversation about like, yeah, there was that episode, but like, is it Kimberly, instead? Like, could we do that? Like, do we want to do that? But I decided Kat was the best choice for what had been established. And also, I mean, look, at that point, I wasn't writing with this in mind because that wasn't my job, but there was the potential, like Jason wanted to do something with this in live action, right? And so I remember sending him the outline. He's like, "Oh, is that Kat, like Kat Sutherland's character playing my wife?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, great, she'll do it. Like if we do it for live action, she'll totally do it. Great, you know." So he was excited about that. And ultimately, when the book came out, he was like, he was really jazzed about it. Like I bounced, like it was more like I would tell him like, "Hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. This is what we're doing," and and then he read the full outline for the whole book, and like I said, really liked it. And then read the finished book when it was done, and like I mean, he's very complimentary. He's very very proud to have this story finally done and out there. And he set up, he negotiated his credit with Boom. At one point, like originally, like it was like, "Well, do you want to write this, like Jason?" And he's like, "No, no, 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 I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer." And so it was he wanted the with special consultant Jason David Frank for credit for the book. So he negotiated that with Boom and with Saban, or maybe it was Hasbro then. I can't remember, but either way, it was the same people. And then, yeah, I think that's it, right? Like, oh, I was just going to say the way that they overlapped was then when the Shattered Grid short came out, and then the prospects of like, hey, doing something in the world of the Coinless, which is Lord Drakkon and Shattered Grid and
Yeah.
everything, and the angle of this, and like I said, there was a potential, platform partner that was really interested and willing to put up like real money. It was like, oh, well, I mean, Jason got really, really excited about that. And so that kind of became his focus as far as like doing something for live action. Not that he wouldn't have wanted to do the, Soul of the Dragon if the opportunity presented itself, but like he was really focused on that. And then obviously neither of them were possible with the Hasbro sale and everything.
It's interesting because that kind of answers what I was going to just say, which is that I remember there was a photo that he posted, and I didn't look very hard, but I couldn't find it, where he was dressed in the Soul of the Dragon wardrobe, like he had the
Oh,
coat
was he?
and the beard, and I believe that it was used as like a variant cover for some of the releases or something.
No, 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 no. I know what you're talking about. So those are two different things. So he
Oh,
was
okay.
in the Drakkon costume. That was part of how when he was, backing out from doing the short in the 11th hour, part of our conversation that got him really excited about it was I was, we basically were able to set him up with his own variant cover of issue number 25, the start of Shattered Grid, where we kill the Green Ranger. We literally set aside in our very, very tight 1 day shooting window, we blocked out an hour in there so we could have Jason's photographer, Justin Betancourt, who was there, and his lovely wife, Kirby, do all of this photo shoot of Jason with an eye towards, of course, having like behind the scenes stuff that Jason wanted, but towards we're going to turn one of these photos into a variant cover for issue 25. And guess what? That variant cover is only available from Jason himself. So he was able to monetize the variant cover at conventions in a pretty good and cool way. So that was the part that then he was like, okay, yeah, no, that's because like a good Jason loved business, and so if you could appeal to him on that front, or at the very least, like think it through in a way that it is a good business deal, like then Jason gets even more excited. You know what I mean? And so that was the case on that one. So we had that cover, but then there was this company, Lineage Studios, maybe, who did some posters, and they did them in a Drew Struzan style, like fully painted photo likeness posters of Lord Drakkon on a throne, but then one for Soul the Dragon as well. Yeah, and that was out there in a way that like I remember when those went out, like Jason sent an email because he didn't know they were doing them, and the likeness is so strong. I don't know what contractually the deal is with Hasbro or Saban owning his likeness. I believe they do um, for that stuff. But I think at that time, there was frustration over the fact that this coinless series wasn't going to happen. And so then, posters coming out, like, Jason wasn't thrilled about that in the moment. I think I think Brian talked to them and everything smoothed over at that time. Um, but yeah.
Okay. Switching gears entirely back to Nightwing. Do you have
Yeah.
a favorite artist while you were working on Nightwing?
Oh man, that's such a tough question. I mean, Eddie Barros was my first artist, so he will forever be a favorite of mine and remembered fondly all the issues we did together. I'd have to say Trevor McCarthy, who only did issue 4, but Trevor and I were crazy close, and his style was the closest thing at that time for me to like the Nightwing in my head of what I thought this book could be, because it was kinetic. It was, it in some ways it felt like the precursor to what Daniele De Nicolo and Simone De Meo and some of these incredible Italian artists that come from a very anime influenced background. They worked on Power Rangers. I mean, Daniele drew Shattered Grid. Trevor felt like a little bit like he was like 10 years before that. And that style was super cool to me for like an energetic Nightwing book. Um, then towards the end of my run, my last 2 issues, we had a fill-in artist, or not, well, not a fill-in because it was the last 2 issues, but we had a guest artist, a new artist, who then immediately got poached by Marvel on an exclusive, and he's been there ever since, and it kills me because I love his stuff so much. But Russell Dodderman, and Russell's art on those last 2 issues of Nightwing, they're my favorite 2 issues I wrote, especially the final one. And it's like everything I love about the character and what the book could have been visually and everything is like in Russell's pages. And so that kills me sometimes just thinking about like, oh man, if I could have had Russell for a while, like the things we could have done. But yeah, so it's probably Eddie Barrows, Trevor McCarthy, and Russell I'd go with.
I don't know if this will be a long or a short one, but don't feel like you have to go into
Uh-oh.
massive detail.
Uh-oh.
What was your general outline for Nightwing if he stayed in Chicago in the New 52?
It's going to be a short one because I don't remember.
Oh, well, sorry, Andy.
I don't remember. And also maybe one day I'll do a story with some of that stuff. I've got it all in notebooks. I'd have to go dig it out, but
Th these questions are a bit broken because they came in from Discord, so I'm going to reword them slightly to make them make a bit more
sure.
sense. But what was it like coming up with the concept of Lord Drakkon? Like, where did that come from?
Right. So Drakkon was a really cool one because it came from a place of story first and foremost. So I can walk you through it, like because it was the first time in my career where when I say I grew a lot doing Power Rangers, this is a really good example of it because it was an environment where I wasn't getting lobbed grenades out of nowhere, left, right, and center, like it was on Nightwing. So I actually could plan, and I was a more mature writer by that point, so I could actually plan and map out. Here's the first year, not only like the general arcs that we're gonna do, but here's the larger arc that we're doing across the first year and why, and the emotional arc for these characters. So my way into Power Rangers was like I didn't want to touch the origins. Um, I just knew immediately. It's like even though I don't want to be, we want to do our own thing. I feel like anytime you touch the origin, you are just inviting notes. It's like I would rather start where they're already Rangers and like let's find a different way in. Um, and I rewatched Green with Evil, and I put on the next episode, and I realized the very next episode of the show, like Tommy's a full fledged member of the Rangers, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then it all like unlocked for me, and I saw it. It was like, oh, that's the way in. We do Tommy joining the Power Rangers, but we treat it like there's shades of the Manchurian Candidate. There's like Gaius Baltar and Six from Battlestar Galactica. We deal with if Power Rangers at its core is about the strength of friendship and teamwork. I want to explore those ideas through the lens of a new Ranger joining the team. And in the case of Tommy, he just spent the previous couple weeks trying to kill them. So, like, if you dig just a little bit deeper than surface level, there are a lot of potentially interesting feelings from everyone about this. How does Jason feel about him joining up? Is everyone on board on the team? You know, is anyone a little cautious about it, or like, we're not sure? You know, how does Tommy feel about it? How does he feel about his actions? Is there regret there? Is there guilt there? Is there insecurity there? Like, hey, I was brainwashed and so I could do this, but now that I'm my own person, do I have what it takes to be this Power Ranger, right? And so the story across the first year, which turned into, because we had like one-shot issues, it really turned into like 16 or 17 issues, was basically, in my mind, Green Ranger Year One, where I use the introduction of Tommy to the team as the lens to explore and establish the world of Power Rangers in comics, but also the dynamics with all these kids, right? Well, then the third arc of all that, Saban was like, one of the things that was said to me from day one when Boom came to me to work up a pitch was like, one of the things they were excited about was that Saban was open to like alternate timelines and stuff like that. Now in comics, like Days of Future Past is like, it's a trope, it's a shorthand, but Power Rangers had never really had something like that. So I love that stuff, right? So I designed within the context of this Green Ranger Year One arc for Tommy. Well, the way that you wrap the arc is you have him ultimately in the third arc of this year-long plan. He needs to go up against his greatest fear. So I literalized that by way of an alternate timeline set further in the future where he chose, when the spell was broken, the Sword of Darkness spell was broken, he chose to stay with Rita and then conquered the world with her and then killed her and took her power and became this despot that is the antithesis of we are better together. And that antithesis also represented a dark mirror for Tommy, our main Tommy, to go up against, right? And Drakkon going, you are nothing, like you're worthless. I am the best version of you. And Tommy rejecting that, overcoming that character. And that's where his arc kind of ends, that first arc, right? The run opens with Bulk and Skull interviewing people. What do the Power Rangers mean to you? And they ask Tommy, he doesn't have an answer. End of issue 17, when they come back from the Coinless world, the issue ends with Tommy giving his answer to Bulk and Skull about what it means to be a Power Ranger. So it was all designed narrative and character first. Now, as we got closer and closer to doing it, around it was originally just going to be like an evil alternate timeline version of the White Ranger. Like that was what my original, like that was the shorthand we were working with. As we got closer to the reveal coming up to issue 9, the conversation started happening between Boom and Saban, where the idea was thrown around from Saban, hey, what if you actually just make it a wholly new Ranger? Because there hasn't been a wholly new Mighty Morphin Power Ranger in 25 years. So there's a marketing opportunity here, but B, there's like a way to create something new that's ownable for, Saban at that point, that also is like super additive potentially to the line if it works. We don't know. I mean, everyone loved the idea, and it's a low-hanging fruit idea. It's like the best version of the Green Ranger, or the most exciting version of the Green Ranger, is when he's bad, right? So the idea of like, I mean, the Dimensions in Danger writers kind of said the same thing about when they were doing their episode, because there were similarities between their episode and Shattered Grid, but we were on separate development paths. So the left hand was not talking to the right hand. So no one's ripping anything off of each other. They really are independently driven things. The closest was that their villain was named Lord Draven, which was a little like, it's a little weird. So then the conversation started. I remember I was in Paris and I was like sitting in a little cafe and I was like dealing with emails, and I was like, I knew I had to come up with a name, and they needed a backstory. So I built this backstory that I knew I could write and I was excited about, of like the white ranger, the tiger powers, and the dragon sword powers in conflict with each other and everything. And that's where you get some of like the vein stuff. Like Saban really wanted veins for some reason, so that's where you get some of the vein stuff coming up the neck, and like, um, and also that informed Jamal Campbell's design for the suit and the coin and everything else. And then when I was back in Chicago a week later, I took half a day sitting there trying to come up with a name. And I knew I wanted Lord something because Lord Zed. And so it's like, okay, that's where I'm starting. And then like, I mean, the obvious one is like Draco Malfoy, like Dragon, Draco, Lord Draco. Like that'd be a cool name. I can't do that. Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy, etc. So then it becomes like, okay, coming up with permutations and trying to find something. And so I landed on Drakkon, Drakkon, and that was the winner. And Saban loved it, and so that's what we went forward with.
Nice. I remember because, as I say, I was reading those issues live when I got to the end of whatever issue it was. I don't remember, but and I saw that, and I distinctly remember it was teased like you were about to see Lord Zed because I think the throne
Yeah,
is in shot, and then it's
it
like
is.
you can almost see the camera pan round, and instead there's this
Yeah,
white Green Ranger, but with Zed's red like
yeah.
visor. I went ballistic because I was like, what am I looking at?
Yeah, man. Jamal Campbell crushed it on the design. Crushed it on the design. Like there were a lot of notes. Like it was definitely a collaborative, experience on that front. Um, but I think it turned out super cool. So
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's actually very interesting hearing that the TV show didn't know what you were doing on Shattered Grid because I think everyone has just basically assumed that that was the closest the TV show could get to doing like their version of Shattered Grid. Because, like you say, the villain was called Draven, but like the the main sort of appeal is these teams of rangers fighting these robot rangers, which felt
right,
like a
right.
stand-in for the sentries.
No,
So
I'll tell you, it was funny when we went in. I mean, I knew an inkling about Dimensions in Danger only because Jason had filmed it. So he mentioned to me once or twice, like, "Oh yeah, we did this thing," and but he didn't have all the details and everything, and I was like, okay, well, they'll tell us if we're stepping on any toes here, as we're doing this because we were pitching, like I said, Shattered Grid like a year before we did it. And then came this meeting where Ryan Parrott and myself and Daphne, our editor, and I think Bryce, our managing group editor, all were at Saban, and they showed us Dimensions in Danger, and we were like deep into writing Shattered Grid. None of it had come out yet, I don't think, or maybe the first issue came. No, I don't think any of it had come out, but we were deep into it, right? It may or may not have even been announced. And we're sitting there and they're showing us this episode and I'm watching it and Ryan is watching it. And Ryan and I went to college together. We go way back, right? Like Ryan is turning to me and I'm turning to him. We both know what each other is thinking. And then he texts me under the table and he goes, they're going to kill Shattered Grid. And because Ryan works in TV and to him, it was like, oh, they're showing us like, hey guys, so we've got a situation and like there are these elements that overlap and everything, you know what I mean? And that's not what the conversation was. Like the conversation afterwards, we're like, what do you guys think? We're like, I mean, it's cool, but like, are you worried at all that like we're doing something that's like kind of this, but like way bigger and we're gonna come out first? And they're like, no, it's not the same. Like it's additive. Like we think it's additive. And we're like, are you sure? Like, and they were. And to their credit, like they never were scared of that, in a way that I think other people might have been. And what's the easiest thing to kill at that point? A comic book, not your TV show episode that you've sunk a lot more money into. But they let us do it, and there's a Joshua Moore just put out a book a few months ago about the history of Power Rangers, and I did an interview for it, and so I checked it out when it came out, and Becca Barnes and Alvin and I think one or two others that were the writers for the show, they spoke about it, and they said the same thing, which is like their only bummer was had they known about Shattered Grid, they would have loved to try to do something that like touched on it and tied into it, you know?
but
Um,
that would have been cool.
It would have been super cool. But I don't know what the dynamics were behind the scenes. I have no idea. Like I was in my lane basically.
Now for the a weird question from Mr. Mark. Do you think your influence is felt in the Power Ranger fandom?
Uh, if you like my stuff, I guess, if you like the comics, um, and I still meet a lot of Power Ranger fans. Like, I had a really cool experience in December where we went down to CCXP in Brazil, and originally we were going. It's the biggest convention in the world. It's like 250,000 people. It was insane, and there's a massive Japanese community there, and there's also a huge love for Super Sentai and Kamen Rider and Power Rangers. And so Radiant Black was supposed to come out before we went. That's why we were going that year. And it didn't end up happening. It didn't work out with the publisher because Marcelo and Eduardo on Radiant Black, they live in Brazil. They're Brazilian, right? So the whole time I was there, though, I signed more Power Ranger comics than I've ever signed in my life. And I realized that the books had only just started coming out in Brazil. And so it was work that I did almost 10 years ago. In some cases, actually 10 years ago when the book launched. That's where we're at right now, like to the day almost. And it was really cool to see the work resonate in a different culture, in a different decade, the same way that it did for people here. And I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool for sure. So maybe there's some influence there, I guess. But I also think like, the brand's awesome. We all love it for very similar reasons, and we just want to see it kind of flourish to its most potential.
One more community question, and then two quick addendums from me, and then we're done.
Sure.
This is the question that I think you're gonna laugh at when I ask. Um,
Okay.
do you have any thoughts on the fact that there are people out there who believe that Soul of the Dragon's story was plagiarized? I was
No,
right.
I mean, no, I mean, that's just not true. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything really more to say than that. Like,
Yeah,
that's just not true. Yeah.
fair. And something that I was going to ask you earlier, and then I forgot, and then you've just reminded me is of the well, unless there's not that many, in which case just feel free to tell me. But of the Kamen Rider and Super Sentai series that you've seen,
Mhm.
which one did you find yourself gravitating towards? Like, what did you enjoy?
So I'm a huge fan of Kamen Rider Build. Like I have a Rocket Panda soft vinyl behind me. Like I loved Build. And actually it was my Ultraman editor, Tom Brevoort, who suggested that I try Build because he was like, this is it. It's great. It's modern, but it's also in the spirit of what he's been watching Kamen Rider his whole life. He felt like it represented the spirit of what makes Kamen Rider so great really well. And I mean, I devoured it. Matt Groom watched it as well. Like we were watching it and kind of like comparing notes as we went. I just thought I mean, it's so many great twists and turns, great characters, like all amazing costumes and different forms. Like I loved I was blown away by the world building and just crazy impressed with the scope, but also like the malleability of character and theme within that scope to like I don't know, it just worked for me really well. So that was a really big one, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, see, Build is actually one I tried to watch when it was coming out, and I bounced off of
Mhm.
it. I should go back and try it again because I did the same thing with Deno when everyone said that that was really good, and I tried watching it and I
Yeah.
couldn't get on with it. But then when I watched it the second time, binged the whole thing, watched all 20 movies or however many ridiculous that particular show has. And yeah, I think the nice thing about Kamen Rider as a whole is that a lot of their shows, their tone is wildly different. Like if you watch a show and think, oh, this is a bit silly for me, it's like, well, that's fine because there's at least 10 others out there that take everything super serious. Like you'll find a
Yeah.
show that will get your attention. So yeah, it was really it's cool that Build was that for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And my final question, which has got nothing to do with any of that, it's something that you said right at the start. Um,
Yeah.
you said that you were like a sound person, like you do the sound mixes and the sound editing.
Yeah.
For a completely different reason, this has actually been something that I've seen come up a lot recently, which is that people don't really understand sound mixing and like the different
Mm.
mixes that people do and why. And feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but I remember I watched well, it was a video, but it was like a documentary video where they were basically saying that these mixes and people not necessarily putting in the time or the money to do them right is a big part of the reason why you watch so much stuff now, where when you get it home and watch it at home, the dialogue is really quiet, the music is really loud, and any kind of boom or roar or
Right.
whatever absolutely deafens you. A, would you
Right.
agree? And B, for those people that maybe don't understand all of that, is it possible to explain it in a simple way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I agree or not. Like I've got two really good sound setups in our apartment. So I'm like probably not the right person to ask in regards to that because like my systems are like,
Finely
calibrated and like,
tuned.
yeah, yeah. But I would say that like it ultimately stems from what you're mixing for and whether you're doing only one mix or you're mixing for multiple formats. So like in theatrical films, you're mixing for the theater, but then typically you're doing a home video mix, or you used to, and that might be what you're talking about, because as budgets have gone away, the care of mixing, like the reason why a theater is different from home, like fundamentally, is you're talking about large speakers versus small speakers. So near field monitors, which are like what's on my desk right now, those are designed to be they're smaller, tweeters. They're designed to be closer in proximity, right? Far field monitors, which are what are really big speakers for theaters and everything, they're not intended to be a foot away from you on your desk. So the amount of air that a far field monitor is pushing through space, which is how sound is created and generated, perpetuated. The amount of air that those speakers are pushing is significant compared, especially with near field monitors. So it's a different acoustic environment that you are taking into consideration. And also in a theater, you have to take into consideration like density of crowd, how many like reverb, like that affects all those things in a way that doesn't translate perfectly very well to a home speakers, right? The other part of it too is that your dynamic range in a theater, what's expected and allowed is much wider than in your living room, unless you have like a crazy setup and everything. But most people don't. And in a theater, your attention is focused in one spot, the screen. So scenes and dialogue that are quieter are actually sometimes by design. You want to clarity is most important, of course, but like that creates the lean in kind of effect. Big moments, if you build to them right, can be very massive and overpowering in a way that's by design. At home, those peaks and valleys, if they're too far apart, you're riding your volume knob left, right, and center because most people you're not comfortable with those wide dynamic ranges, right? I mean, I don't know if the way most home theaters or most home video releases now are done is just like slapping a compressor and a limiter on the theatrical mix and putting it out that way. I'm not sure. That's not how I would do it if I ever put a theatrical film out home video. I'd spend my own money if I had to do a new mix. Um, but I do think there's something to the fact that like as we have moved into object-based mixing, which is what Dolby Atmos is, and for just the super quick explainer, the difference between like 5.1 surround sound or even 7.1 surround sound and Dolby Atmos is the difference between how do I put this? Dolby Atmos is a format and it's scalable depending on how many speakers you have because at its center is a processor that can figure out if I want to place an object in this part of the room,
of the theater, right? It requires these 8 speakers to talk to each other and produce the same sound in different levels of it in order to create the illusion that that object's noise is originating from right here, right? So that system, object-based panning, can be scaled depending on how many speakers you have, right? It's why you can also have Dolby Atmos at home versus and have Dolby Atmos in a theater. Now the thing is though, Dolby Atmos at home is going to be a different listening experience than Dolby Atmos in a theater. And if you're just porting your Atmos mix from the theater to home, that's part of the selling point of Atmos is like your object-based mixing is it's gonna be more accurate to what the mixer intended than if you were doing 5.1 mix. 5.1 means you have 6 speakers. You have traditional left front, center front, right front, left rear, right rear, and a subwoofer. The subwoofer is the 0.1. That's your 6th speaker. You can create atmospheres and ambiances and immersion, but you can't, you can do hard left to right pans and move stuff from like, front speaker to back speaker and even like cross from front left to back rear. But you can't really place things in the same way as like you can in Atmos. Now, I would argue in most cases, you don't really need to, but that's where we've gone technology wise and everything. I would have to ask some people, but I would definitely suspect that a theatrical Atmos mix played on a home setting, if not really worked over and mixed properly for that home setting, I would imagine that things don't translate exactly 1-to-1 in a way that like, maybe the home environment is not as conducive to that type of playback. But I might be wrong. They might have worked all that out. And it's been a minute since I've really been in that world, despite working with a lot of sound supervisors and doing the audiobook and everything now. But I love it, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I don't necessarily think that people do it because they're looking to do it wrong or whatever, but
Yeah.
I definitely feel that one of the issues that I've certainly seen, like in my own watching of content, is I put in a Blu-ray and it defaults to the best, in its opinion, sound, but that might not be possible for the type of thing that you're watching it on. Like, trying to watch a 7.1 surround sound mix on a TV speaker is not gonna give you particularly good results,
Well, the good news is though, if you're watching a 5.1 or a 7.1 mix, and I'm pretty sure Atmos, actually I know Atmos has the same feature. What the other thing that's happening though is there's a core that is called a fold down. So typically what happens is if it's just a typical like Dolby Digital 5.1 mix, it'll be an AC3 file, right? And we've moved beyond that with Dolby True HD and things like that. But like let's just talk about, because the concept is the same across all these formats. So you have an AC3 file. That AC3 file is designed to be played back on your sound system, interpreted as an AC3 file, as a 5.1 file, and played to your 6 speakers if you have a 5.1 setup, right? The way that the file is put together, though, is what's called a fold down. So it's a matrix encode. So your left rear, I'm going to get this wrong because it's been a minute, but basically your left and right rears are folded into the fronts, but they're out of phase by 180 degrees. And so that way the system clocks, oh, hey, this stuff that's out of phase is intended for the rear speaker channels. And this stuff that's whatever, this is actually the center channel. And so it folds it out. But what it means is that by packaging it up like that, it's like a lot of times you'll get like an LTRT, left total, right total, your rears into your fronts. By packaging it that way, it means that if you're playing it back on a system that doesn't have 5.1 sounds, it's actually playing back stereo because it's folding everything down from what's intended to be 5.1 into just a true 2.0 mix.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. People of the world, you have learned something, hopefully, about sound mixes.
I promise you, my comics are more exciting than that just was.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got Power Rangers. I don't own any physical Radiant Blacks because I don't read
Oh, we got to
physical
change
comics
that.
like I used to. Oh yeah,
Okay.
I would like some, but I like,
Yeah.
you know, for comics in particular,
Oh,
I
yeah.
like, you know, because I've got
Yeah.
some loose comics and they're just a pain to store.
Oh, yeah. And our massive edition hardcovers for Radiant Black is like the premium version. They match. They're a little shorter than the Power Rangers hardcovers, but they're designed to go along with them. Just for our own OCD a little. I mean, we're doing our own thing for sure, but like they look nice together on the shelf. I'll say that.
Yeah. Um, so where can people find you online if they want to come
Yeah.
check you out?
Best place, probably through our Black Market narrative hub. If you just go to blackmarket.la, that's our company. We have a newsletter, Black Market News. You can sign up for there or go to newsletter.blackmarket.la. That's where we put out updates on all of our projects, our books. We'll do exclusive editions and do drops of like rare variant covers and stuff there. It's also where we are debuting new stories from newer creators that we are doing for vertical scrolling comics, called Black Market Presents, and then the behind the scenes on the No One movie. We'll be doing a lot of documenting of stuff there and everything. So that's a really good spot. And then we're also on YouTube. We have a Massiveverse YouTube channel. And we do live streams every Monday night. And then Instagram. You know, I'm on Instagram, and then Massiveverse account is on Instagram as well.
Sweet. Well, is there anything you would like people to know before you go?
No, I think I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, we're shorter than Johnny's, but not by a ton. We've been going for a minute here.
Yeah, not intentionally, but I can't tell you exactly how long we've been going, but thank you very much
Oh,
for
that's
taking
okay.
the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. We'll have to do it. We'll do it again after the No One movie comes out.
Yes, let's do it. And on that bombshell, guys, all that remains for me to do is to hand you over to the me of the future to tell you what's coming next. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. You've made it to the end. Thank you very much, Kyle, and thank you to all of you for getting this far. It has been a blast. Kyle was very gracious with his time, and as we said in the episode, a lot of it came from how much he enjoyed the episode with Johnny Yong Bosch. And I know some of you have also enjoyed the episode with Eric Jacobus. And I hope that as we go forward, you'll be checking out some of the other episodes where we're just talking about a singular film, and it isn't necessarily an interview episode. Though there is an interview episode still to come that I thought wasn't going to happen, but now it looks like it is. So I don't know when the next interview conversation is coming, but there is one still on the horizon that, fingers crossed, we can make reality, because action fans are definitely going to be interested in that one, and that's all I'm going to say. But thank you once again to everybody that was listening. Regular service will resume. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, then hi. But I am going to slowly but surely be transitioning into there always being a video portion of the podcast. It can't happen straight away because of how much backlog I've got, but there will just come a point where I'm probably going to do everything video first and then work on a way to get better audio than I currently do, because that is the only thing holding me back. Is I don't like how the audio comes out of the video, and I don't want to have to edit everything twice. But we'll have to figure that out as I go. So look forward to that. If you prefer to watch talking heads, then good news. It's coming, baby. It's coming. But that's all we have time for today, my friends. Thank you very much for listening or watching, whatever it is that you choose to do. I appreciate it. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below. And if you are watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. And if you're watching it on anything else, Spotify, Apple, listening, watching, you know what I meant. Feel free to rate us and feel free to leave comments there as well. I've been enjoying seeing the Spotify comments that have been coming through over the last few months. And I pretty much will respond to everything that gets left, at least at the moment. So, yeah, I look forward to reading it. But if not, I'll see you in the next one.
On the Action Addicts Podcast.